It's Kevin and Query.
I throw, you catch. It's not that hard, okay? All right, get the out of here.
I'm going to talk a lot about drills and fundamentals.
Watch it, watch it, watch it, watch it.
On 93.5
Watch it.
and 107.5.
Boom, baby.
The Fan.
Mark, I got to tell you, and by the way, Mark Dykton in this morning, Kevin Bowen on vacation. Good morning to you. Jake Query here, Sam Fritz running the big board. We are inside the Hubler.com studios here, and I didn't think, I think we kind of made fun of it yesterday, but the smoke thing is real. I mean, I woke up this morning and was driving to work, and especially going down Capitol, I mean, it was hard to see the skyline.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's crazy. It literally is like, the outside right now looks like something out of, like, I feel like it's like a Will Smith science fiction movie or something.
This is what I imagine, like, London looks at, like, most days, like, with all, like, the rain and the fog. That's what I've always thought, like, oh, just as hazy all the time. That's what it looks like outside. I got the same image this morning that I got yesterday driving on 70 getting in downtown. You couldn't see the buildings. Like, Lucas Oil Stadium is just like a dark shadow in the sky.
Yeah, it is something, man.
Yeah.
It is something. Now, speaking of the same this morning as yesterday, did you ever read the comic strip Blondie? I mean, comic
yes.
strips, I realize in the newspaper are kind of a thing of the past. But So, Dagwood Bumstead carpooled every day to work, right?
Uh-huh.
So
I'm not going to act like I know the history of Blondie and
well,
all
but
the
like one of the
intricacies.
themes in the comic strip is he had like a carpool group. So I wouldn't say that I carpool, because carpool means you alternate people driving, right? Mm-hmm. But yesterday I was driving to work, and I was coming down Capitol, and there was one of the Indigo buses was on the side of the road with the hazards on. I don't know what the issue was, but it was at one of the bus stops, and I see the guy waiting for and he's kind of like, in other words, the person that's getting ready to get on the bus is like looking at his watch, and the bus is sitting there with hazards on, and I'm like, well, this doesn't look good if you're a bus rider, right? Uh-huh. So I rolled the window down. I'm like, hey, man, where are you going? And he said, well, I got to go to the transfer center, which is obviously by the old Market Square, to go out east. And I go, well, I'm going downtown, man. You want to ride? And he kind of thought, I could tell he thought about, like, I don't know. And he's like, all right, sure. So he gets in, and he works out at Community East. Nice guy. So we chat briefly. Of course, it's like 6:30 in the morning, so how loquacious is one at 6:30 in the morning, right? So we get downtown, and I'm like, all right, here you go. And I said, well, hey, I'll look for you tomorrow. And sure enough, this morning I'm driving down, and I was coming down, and at the same bus stop, he was sitting on the bench waiting for the bus, and I pulled over and gave it a honk, and he hops in. Hey, good morning. Daryl is his name.
He's got it like a personal Uber driver now.
So Daryl and I shot the bull this morning. He watched Frozen last night.
Oh, well, I've been there.
With his nephew.
Uh-huh.
And said he fell asleep during it.
Oh, well, you'll probably see it 100 more times if you're me.
So, but he said overall, I liked his line. He said, I went to bed watching a movie and woke up and the movie was watching me. So, yeah, it's a pretty good way of saying it.
That's how it works.
How about you? Anything exciting happened last night other than the smoke?
Not really. Yeah, we kind of looked outside. Girls were like, can we go to the park? I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't look great. Like, it's not that you don't want to deter them from going outside, but it just doesn't look like great quality of like being. It just kind of like you look out and you're kind of like, do I want to go outside right now? If I can see the air, I don't know if I really want to be breathing it.
Mark, they say, I mean, they, who is they, right? But reports are that the air quality, I mean, it's literally like the worst that I can ever remember. I don't ever remember seeing. I didn't even know of like the air quality numbers. And this morning in Indianapolis, it's at like 262, and over 200 is like stay the hell inside. It's 262. I mean, literally, it's like good morning Shanghai, right?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, honestly.
Yeah. So the girls wanted to go to the park. I was like, let's maybe just like stay indoors and watch movies or something like that. So they watched a couple of their cartoons, and I was doing prep for the show and watching the Cubs game on the computer screen and all that stuff. So got some work done, but yeah, most of the time is just kind of staying indoors yesterday.
A lot to talk about over the course of this morning, including the Colts practice schedule is out for training camp.
God, I was glued to my Twitter screen and waiting for that release. I could not wait. So come on already. Start the live stream. Let's go. I need to know these dates.
You had your schedule. Well, especially for the joint practices with the Bears, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I assumed those were going to be at the end, and they were. But, yeah. My wife's like, are we going to that? I'm like, yeah, I would say we are.
I remember. Now, I'm going to be the old guy. I remember when I was a kid. But just for example, Mark, when I worked in St. Louis and I covered the Rams, which is funny because I was kind of my entry level to, and I've told this story 1,000 times, but I'll make it 1,001, okay? When I worked at Channel 6, now I want people to grasp this, okay? This is how far things have come in 25 years. When I was 25 years old, my first job in media, essentially, my first job was at the Star in the Agate Bureau. I took phone calls and wrote the box scores for high school football and basketball games. It was a great job. I liked it. And then, but I had been shadowing Ed Sorensen, the sports director at Channel 6, since I was like in 6th grade. And finally, I just said, look, is there any job I can do here? And he got me a job through a temp agency at Channel 6 as essentially the entry level, whatever they needed done. Mixing coffee, cutting tape, running scripts, etc. In 1998, the Brickyard 400 was running. It would have been I've got to think, 5th running, I guess, of the Brickyard 400. And Ed comes up to me one day, and I was kind of excited for the Brickyard 400 because, it was at the Speedway, right? And it was a big deal. And Ed says, hey, we're not going to credential you for the Brickyard 400. And I remember being like devastated by that. And I said, okay. And he said, because we've got to send you to Champaign, Illinois. And I said, why am I going to Champaign, Illinois? And he said, well, the Colts have a joint practice with the St. Louis Rams in Champaign. Mm-hmm. And we need somebody to go cover that. And by cover that, it meant that I went with Dennis Goins, the photographer, and I was just the guy that held the microphone afterwards to get interviews. Hey, how'd the team look? Whatever. It was important to cover that because it was the first time that the rookie quarterback was going to see a different look other than themselves of a defense in the NFL. So that is why, and I think Mike Chappell will back me up on this, that is why when Peyton Manning for the very first time saw a defense other than that of his own team, literally afterwards he walked into a locker room with like 3 Champaign, Illinois writers, Mike Chappell and myself, because every other sports person in Indianapolis was covering the Brickyard 400 because that was way bigger than Colts training camp. And then 2 years after that, I ended up getting a job in St. Louis, and like my first responsibility was to cover the Rams training camp in Macomb, Illinois. And I just remember, you always did move-in day. And it was like the nonstop video of guys walking into the dorms, carrying pillows, carrying suitcases, carrying sleeping bags. And it looked like the Bataan Death March. They wanted to be anywhere but going to that because it was like this long, 2-month-long just slog of just 2-a-days and, everything, right?
Carrying in their 27-inch TVs and their Xbox, like original Xboxes and everything.
Totally.
PlayStation 1s.
And literally it was like guys going to camp or going away to their freshman year of college. Now you have the following dates: July 26th, July 28th, July 29th, July 31st, August 1st, August 3rd, August 5th, August 6th, August 8th, August 10th, August 15th, August 16th, and August 17th. Now, I would assume that they have activities and stuff going on those other days. These are the days of
open to the public.
The open to the public practices. But still, you're basically looking at 3 weeks in Westfield, not living in dorms, not none of that. I'm not saying that the old way was better by any stretch. It's just different. I mean, it's different now. And the Players Association, I'm sure, has something to do with that. But we'll go over the course of, the schedule today and let you know, folks, days that you're coming out and the days that, kind of have a theme to them, the different things. Most of the days, the practices are 9 to noon, and then later, practices, so like 10 to 11, 10 to 11:15, It has the hours also for the Colts City, but the practices in terms of what times fans can watch, usually about 90 minutes, is the open to the fans section of the practice. You going to go out at all?
Yeah, I'm sure I'll go out a couple times. I think we're already planning to go out when the Bears are doing their joint practices. I'm sure that'll be the heaviest populated events will be the back-to-back practices against the Bears, Wednesday, August 16th and Thursday, August 17th. Those are always fun. We've gone to the joint practices I think they had with I'm trying to think now. It was like was it the Bengals one year? And then I think they did the Ravens. We went to the Ravens one. That was fun and all that. So it's always a good time. It's nice seeing other players you wouldn't normally see, and you get the kind of an up-close personal look at stuff. So it's always cool to see all that. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll go out a couple times. I know our show will be out there a couple times. We're figuring out the schedule as it is and all that. I'm sure we'll bring those dates to you when we have more information. But our show will definitely be out there. The midday show will be out there. JMV will be out there. The whole station will be out there throughout the course of training camp, I'm sure.
Speaking of JMV, he's going to be at Walk-Ons later today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to head down there. You going to go down?
My wife works, so I don't think it's child friendly because otherwise I bring 3 daughters with me.
Instead, you'll be home watching Frozen, right? Or
Frozen 2, or Hotel Transylvania, or something like that.
Hotel Transylvania?
It's an Adam Sandler cartoon where it's like a monster hotel. It's Dracula and Frankenstein and the Mummy. And
is it scary or are they?
No, it's funny.
Hanging out.
It's just like a goofy kids movie where it's monsters and then this human invades the hotel played by Andy Samberg and he's trying to deter it.
The air quality, by the way, as of right now, somebody just sent to me 229. That's micro dust per whatever, right? It's listed as very unhealthy. Health warnings of emergency conditions. The entire population is more likely to be affected. Avoid all physical activity outdoors. Move activities indoors or reschedule to a time when air quality is better.
So what you're saying is we're taking one for the team today. We drove into work.
I mean, honestly, maybe it's the power of suggestion, Mark, but like I feel like my eyes kind of are bothered. It's like allergies.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's just the power of suggestion?
I think it's the power of the suggestion, but also like you're looking out and you're like, are my eyes working correctly? Because everything looks blurry, but that's just what it looks like right now.
I mean, it is definitely less than desirable. Interesting day yesterday in the world of sports. Stephen Holder, by the way, going to join us at 8 o'clock. We'll talk Colts with him this morning. Couple of kind of tragic stories yesterday in the world of sports. We'll start with Jimmy Johnson. I don't know if you saw that story.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
Jimmy Johnson will miss some racing, at least the next race on the schedule, because of the fact that his in-laws, so his wife's parents and their nephew, all victims in a domestic murder-suicide situation. I can't recall which one was the shooter. That's obviously in a level of that tragedy that's irrelevant, and it's also personal. I mean, I get it. But Jimmy Johnson is, I don't know his wife, obviously, but, from his time in IndyCar and just being around it, a super nice guy. And I know that there have been a lot of well wishes within the racing community pouring into him. When I heard that news, the first thing I thought of was, in equal tragedy, I guess, but, obviously not, obviously of equal tragedy. But a few years ago, the same thing happened with Robbie Gordon's parents, which Robbie Gordon's parents would be the in-laws of Ryan Hunter-Reay, because Ryan Hunter-Reay is married to Robbie Gordon's sister. And they had a similar situation. That might have been a father and stepmother. I can't remember the exact circumstances, but nonetheless, tragic situation, obviously. The other one, not to start with back-to-back, sad stories.
Yeah.
Did you see about Ryan Mallett?
Yeah, former Arkansas quarterback, drowned in Florida.
He was a quarterback that, if you recall, when he was with the New England Patriots, there was a lot of discussion about him of like he was the next guy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, to the point where I was trying to think of this yesterday. Who was it that was like really high on Ryan Mallett? Was it Bill Simmons that was saying like they should trade?
That wouldn't surprise me.
Or release Brady because he was getting older and hand the keys over to Ryan Mallett. And then obviously he ended up being sent to Houston, I believe, in a trade. And I think the Texans thought that he was going to be kind of like Rob Johnson was like that. Rob Johnson was with Buffalo, and people were like, you know what, like this is the guy. Who was the Matt Flynn? Matt Flynn was a backup in Green Bay, and so like Seattle mortgaged everything to get him because it was like, well, he's being held back, and then he got there and really couldn't do anything.
Well, Russell Wilson beat him out. They're like, we gotta start this rookie, I think.
Is that who it was?
Yeah.
And then obviously in Mallett's situation, he went to Houston, and I think the Texans thought he was going to be the guy, Brock Osweiler-esque, with similar results. But sad news, he drowned. I guess he was coaching high school football, right?
Yeah, something about he was with a group of people and then, struggled to get back to shore or something like that. So they pulled him out of the water. He wasn't breathing. They checked, and then they pronounced him dead at the hospital. So only 35 years old. Very sad story. Yeah, a couple of downers yesterday for sure in the world of sports. Yeah,
but, certainly didn't want to start the morning with but those were two big stories. Now, on the positive side of things, how about and it is amazing. Last night, Mark, and I do this from time to time, especially in the summer, I get nostalgic for it. I've always said that sports is largely based and rooted to an extent in nostalgia. I think sometimes that as adults, when we watch sports, we are watching and hoping for the best for our team, because when we see them succeed and we see them celebrate, it awakens in us the magic and the excitement that we had for that team when we were kids. I don't know that grown adults that you just naturally or organically find the same level. It's not like you got so many things going on, but your escape then is to watch your team, and part of why you want to see them succeed is because you are chasing the high that you first got when you were introduced to the world of sports. And that nostalgia for me in the summertime, I absolutely loved when I was a kid, loved This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen. I loved it. I loved everything about it. It would start out, it had the great intro music that was actually the theme song to the TV game show Jackpot from the early 70s. And then Mel Allen's voice would come on. It was always brilliantly written, and he would preview. And the concept of this now is so absurd. So the concept of it was literally on Saturday morning, you would sit for 30 minutes and watch a guy recap for you like the game recap of the Red Sox-Tigers game that took place on Tuesday. I mean, come on, right?
Yeah. Simpler times back then.
But what's crazy about it, Mark, so I watched last night, I pulled up, you can, on your television now, there's 10,000 apps, whatever, you talk into the remote and boom, it pops up. So I watched one yesterday from This Week in 1977. And in the opening montage of players that they were going to talk about that week, they talked about Lou Brock's chase of Ty Cobb's stolen base record. They talked about Carl Yastrzemski and a hitting streak he was on for Boston. They talked about Rod Carew was flirting with 400 home runs. They talked about a 2-home run game for Steve Garvey to overcome a game where Johnny Bench hit a home run. Uh-huh. And they talked about a game where Reggie Jackson had 2 home runs in the same game. And I'm like, okay, there's 6 Hall of Famers right there out of 7 guys, or 5 out of 6, or whatever it might be. Garvey's not in the Hall of Fame, but he's a relative household name from that era, maybe not now. And then I got to thinking about it. I'm like, but baseball today, how many stars can kids name? I think baseball cards have a lot to do with that. But how many stars can the average kid name now in baseball? 3?
Yeah.
The average kid. I don't mean like a diehard. I mean like the average kid.
Yeah. I mean,
Mike Trout, right?
Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani would probably
Bryce Harper.
Yeah.
Outside of that,
Kershaw?
Probably Kershaw. I mean, so there's probably 10 realistically,
right.
But I'm just saying,
stop a kid on the street and ask him, name 5 current baseball players.
Yeah, and yet, so you would get up on Saturday morning, you'd watch This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen. How about that? You'd watch that, and then the Baseball Bunch with Johnny Bench was on, which was and the San Diego Chicken, by the way, later known as the Famous Chicken because he had some sort of strike with the Padre folk. That was on. And then the game of the week was on. And, I mean, literally the game of the week was you didn't care who it was. It was like, I'm watching, why are you watching this game between the Philadelphia Phillies and the Houston Astros? What's the game of the week? I remember when the Cubs, in the Ryan Sandberg game, the Cubs hit 2 home runs. Sandberg hit 3 home runs against the Cardinals in the Ryan Sandberg game. That was a massive deal for Cubs fans because it was the game of the week, and the whole country's watching. Different era.
That anniversary just happened, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, just a few days ago.
That game was unbelievable. But the long-winded point that I'm trying to make here is last night what Shohei Ohtani did. I mean, you strike out 10 on the mound and then hit 10 home runs at the plate. And ESPN made a big deal out of the fact he did all that with a broken fingernail. Okay?
He hit 2 home runs, by the way, not 10.
What'd I say? He struck out 10.
You said he struck out 10 and hit 10.
No. He hit 2.
That would be incredible.
He hit 2 and struck out 10. But I mean, that's like Babe Ruth stuff, right?
Yeah, it is. Definitely is Babe Ruth stuff.
I mean, the 6th time, I like the stat. It said this is only the 6th time since 1893 that someone has struck out 10 and hit 2 home runs. And I'm like, well, the other 5 had to be like 1893 to 1902, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
pre-depression era.
Yeah, like Raleigh Fingers wasn't doing that, right? But it's amazing. And yet, Mark, with that, you wonder to yourself, why is he not a household name? I mean, he is, but why is he not? Could Shohei Ohtani walk down Michigan Avenue in Chicago? How many people stop him?
I don't know. That's a good question. I always go back to that. It might be just the team that he plays for and the
but he
time
plays
zone
in Los Angeles.
But for the majority of the country, their start times don't start till like 9:30 Eastern time or something like that. A lot of people are getting ready for bed at that point and all that stuff. So you see the highlights, but you don't get to actually watch them on a game in and game out basis. Like, it's just not one of those things that most people that aren't Angels fans are checking in on.
Somebody makes a good point here. Jake, baseball's now super regional.
That's 100% true.
I could have told you the whole Red Sox roster when I was 12. They say it's true. I've said forever. I mean, J&V and I have done it when I've been on with them a million times. You mentioned a team. You mentioned a year in the mid-'80s. I can tell you right now, probably with 80% efficiency, the starting lineup of the All-Star team, National or American League. And now we play a game. One of my favorite games to play, Mark, is All-Star or a guy I went to high school with. And I throw you a name, and I'm like, okay, is that an all-star or a guy that I went to high school with? And you got to guess, and it's like, I'll bet you go 50-50.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's 100% true, though, that it is regional because the RSNs that are in now, the geolocation blocks that are on, certain teams and stuff. Like, you live in L.A., and I don't think you can watch a Dodgers game unless you have, like, the 5th most popular cable package or something like that. It's like, it's not Comcast, it's not anything like that. It's like Cable Warner or something or whatever, and that's the only way that you can watch Dodgers games in Los Angeles without attending a game. So it is definitely super regional, and I think that also is playing a role. And unless you're watching baseball tonight, if they even still have that show, or unless you're really locked in on the MLB app, it is hard to track all these players and what's going on statistically. Like, outside of Ohtani, if you asked who's leading the National League in home runs, I probably couldn't tell you right now.
Jordan Romano. All-star, a guy I went to high school with.
All-star.
Correct. What team?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Mark Lathrop. All-star guy I went to high school with.
Guy you went to high school with.
Correct. How'd you know that? Do you know Lathrop?
I went to high school with you. You didn't remember me?
Lives out in Colorado. A lot to talk about this morning. Stephen Holder will join us at 8 o'clock. We'll talk about the Colts. We'll also get you up to speed on the training camp schedule. We will go over that and let you kind of plan what you want to do in terms of Grand Park, going up and seeing the Colts for their free practices, some of the themes too, days that might be good for the kids, especially once the smoke clears, which hopefully is soon. We'll get you caught up shortly on what happened last night in the world of sports for those of you that might have fallen asleep to Frozen and woken up and the movie was watching you. We'll do that next on Kevin and Query here on is today Wednesday or Thursday?
It's a Wednesday,
right?
And Matt Olson of the Braves is leading the National League, by the way, with 25 home runs. You gave me 15 guesses. I wouldn't have said Matt Olson.
Matt Olson, I went to high school with him too, right?
Oh, there you go.
It's Kevin and Query, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Last night, interleague baseball play. Reds getting back on the right side of things, defeating Cute Fella 3-1. Reds snapping a 3-game losing skid in the race for PBR. That is bad news, for me, as I believe the Diamondbacks 8-4 winners over the Rays. That's Mark's Diamondbacks in our contest here. Kevin getting a win as well. The Athletics 2-1 over the New York Yankees. Other scores yesterday, Major League Baseball. Phillies over the Cubs 5-1. It was the Padres on the short end. Pirates beat them 9-4. Mets over the Brewers 7-2. Dodgers blanked the Rockies 5-0. Cleveland over Kansas City. The Angels over the White Sox 4-2. As we mentioned, Shohei Ohtani now 7-3. He goes 6 1/3, gives up 1 run, strikes out 10, then hits 2 home runs, 27 and 28 on the season. Unbelievable. Rangers over the Tigers. Cardinals 4-2 winners over the Astros. Giants over the Blue Jays. Marlins over the Red Sox. Braves over the Twins. And the Nationals over the Mariners. Jake, why did you just read the entire list of Major League Baseball games? Well, the simple answer, quite frankly, is it's late June, right?
Yeah, that's what we got going on. Indianapolis Indians take on the Louisville Bats in Kentucky tonight, 6:35. Meanwhile, the Fever, they're in action tomorrow night. They try to snap a three. They want to snap their 2-game losing streak. They're wrapping up their 3-game road trip when they host take on the Phoenix Mercury tomorrow at 10 p.m.
The Colts yesterday announcing their training camp Wednesday, July 26th. Going to be your first chance to see them play. Colts City hours will be from 9 until noon in Grand Park in Westfield. But practice from 10 until 11 on Wednesday, July 26th, followed by 10 to 11:15 on that Friday. That's the 28th. And then Saturday, night practice, 6 to 7:30 is the time there. 4 until 8 o'clock, the Colts City hours in terms of all of the festivities for the kids that take place. And then more of the same. The night practices would be on Saturday, August the 5th, night practice, 6 until 7:30. And then as well on Wednesday, August 16th, a night practice from 6 until 8. That is a joint practice with the Chicago Bears. That actually would be, I think, probably the one that most people would want to go to, just to be under the lights and see another team and then hear all the guys say, well, we're just happy to be hitting somebody of a different jersey.
Of course. Not only did you have the training camp schedule for the Colts yesterday, but the Pacers announced their Summer League roster. And Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nemhard, and Isaiah Jackson all on the 15-man Summer League roster.
A game that we can play next. Here's what we're going to do. Summer League player, Major League Baseball player, or guy I went to high school with. I'll bet you if I could, I'm going to give 5. You can't look at the roster. I'll bet I can stump you on 2 of the 5. You got it?
Sure. Unless you say Fambo Zhang, I think I'm okay.
Fanbo didn't last long.
He didn't. But he was wasn't he a Summer League guy?
Fanboy was a Summer League player last year, and he got in. He missed most of the games. He got in late.
He was rooting for the other team all the time. That's what happened.
That's part of being the fanboy, right?
Yeah.
Fanboy Zhang last year, typically if you're not on the floor after 4 games in the Summer League, it's probably not going well for you, right?
Probably not a long-term thing.
But he made his mark. Let's say that.
Definitely on this show.
Stephen Holder in 27 minutes. When we come back, some batting leaders amongst the Major League All-Star team. Basically what I'm getting at is we're going to get you up to speed on who the Pacers are bringing in for the summer roster as well. And you might hear a couple names of dudes I went to high school with. All when we come back on, and be very careful out there because it is a weird start to the morning, and don't spend too much time outside. I hate to sound like my dad, but that is the reality of it. It's Kevin and Query here, 93.5, 107.
listening to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
He's bringing you back, Jake.
It's bringing us back right now, right? Back into the DriveHubler.com studios. Mark Dykton, Jake Query, Sam Fritz on the big board. Kevin back on Monday. This was indeed the opening theme to This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen. You know, the closing theme is the one that it's most known for. We might have to do that on the other side. That's a great one, too.
Okay. I don't know if I've heard that one.
Oh, you've absolutely heard
Have I?
it.
As soon as I hear it, I'm like,
Absolutely.
oh, okay. I might have heard it, but I might not know it was This Week in Baseball's closing music.
It actually is a score called Gathering Crowds, which very few people know. But when you hear it, you're going to go, yeah, no question.
Okay.
We were talking last night, or talking about the fact that last night Shohei Ohtani, what he did for the LA Angels is truly, obviously historic. Only the sixth time it's been done. I like how they said the sixth time since 1893, like as if it was totally commonplace in 1888 and therefore not worth mentioning.
I always like that they still mention like the modern day baseball and starts like in 1900.
By the way, Sam Fritz writing down this segment out at 8:54. We got an hour and 13 minutes to fill here. It's June. What are we going to do for an hour and 13 minutes? I kid with Sam. Nobody is thinking straight because we're all in a smoke haze. If you're just getting up this morning
in a literal fog,
and you are just out and about, a couple of things to rehash before we get to what I was going to talk about here with the Pacers summer roster. First off, good morning to you. Secondly, do be careful today because, and I don't usually, buy into and subscribe to the Chicken Little stuff, but the air quality is really poor because of the smoke from the Canadian wildfires that has worked its way south now to Indiana. And I mean, this morning when I got in my car and was driving down, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was on Capitol coming into downtown from the north, and you couldn't see downtown. It literally looked like a foggy morning, but it's smoke. The air quality is listed as, quote, very unhealthy, and you can definitely sense it. I mean, when you get out, like my eyes were burning a little bit or like stinging. I had a really bad sore throat yesterday.
Just feel like you breathe heavier when you're out there, too. You're
totally.
Like,
and I did see people walking around, and I know people want to make fun of it, whatever. I saw, even this morning, I saw one guy jogging, and he was wearing a mask. And I'm like, look, man, if you got to wear a mask because of the air quality while you're jogging, you just hit a treadmill. Right?
Yeah, there's got to be one around here somewhere indoors.
Secondly, somebody asked me, they said, Jake, can you please recap for those of us new to the show, and thank you for being new to the show, the Race for PBR baseball contest. Very simple, and thank you for asking. At the beginning of the baseball season, we pulled up one of the apps, I don't remember which, and picked the 3 teams. Well, there were like 8 teams that were predicted whose over-under of total number of wins were, I think it was 75 was the number we went with. So the teams who had an over-under of less than 75 wins for the year, we each picked one of them, that being, when I say we, myself, you, Mark Dykton, Kevin Bowen, JMV, I think Eddie Garrison, and I believe Sam Fritz threw their hat in this ring as well. We'd let them think they're part of the game, but they're really not.
Okay, to defend, I didn't throw my hat in the ring. You just gave me a team, Jake.
What team did you get?
That is true.
The Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah.
So the deal was whoever of these teams, primarily of the 3 main original members of this game, whoever of the 3 has the team that wins the most games in this calendar season, the other 2 have to buy him a 6-pack of PBR.
So Kevin owes 1. We already know that.
Kevin took the Oakland Athletics, who are standing right now at a stout 21-60. They are only 28 games back of the Texas Rangers. Mark Dykton went with now let's go with the others that are in poor contention here. The Kansas City Royals. J&V took the Kansas City Royals. They are 22-57. They find themselves 17 games back of the Minnesota Twins. Sam Fritz got the Pittsburgh Pirates. They are at 36-42, 5 games back of your now once again NL Central leading Cincinnati Reds. And Mark Dykton, the Arizona Diamondbacks, 48-32. They are leading the National League West. What was that you just did?
I kissed the sky like Sammy Sosa.
Now, if they are 48-32 and the Orioles are 48-30, that means technically Baltimore's a game up?
Yeah, they have a win percentage of 615 compared to the Diamondbacks who have a win percentage of 600.
So the Orioles, the team that I took, they lost yesterday to the Reds, thus allowing Arizona to nip on the heels. The Orioles, of course, if you're also new to the show, I call them simply cute fella because the little Oriole bird is a cute fella. And if you look at him, he's just saying, hey, root for me. He's a cute-looking fellow, right? Now,
sure.
Shohei Ohtani, as I mentioned, what he did last night, 10 strikeouts, 2 home runs. 6th time it's happened since 1893. And that got me thinking about the fact that Major League Baseball, they do not promote their stars. And I think a lot of people don't know who stars are in Major League Baseball. Additionally, the Pacers summer roster was announced. We'll get you up to speed on who that is. I think that one, you'll know a lot of the names, truth be told. But we're going to do a game here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 names.
Okay.
These are divided amongst Pacers Summer League roster, Major League Baseball players, All-Stars. No, I'm sorry. These are amongst the top 50 batting leaders this year, right now.
Okay.
And dude I went to high school with.
Okay.
So, Sam Fritz, would you like to participate in our game as well?
If you'll have me.
You have to take the Pittsburgh Pirates.
You crashed the party at our PBR.
Yeah, it depends. Are you going to just give
too.
my answers for me, too?
No. I will give me a number 1 through 7, Sam Fritz.
I would just like to go with 7.
Number 7, Josh Jung.
Say again, I'm sorry?
Josh Jung. Is that a Major League player, a Pacer Summer League roster player, or a guy I went to high school with?
Give me a Pacers Summer League player, please.
Do you have the sound effects?
Yeah, which one do I need to do?
You have the
ding and the buzzer?
Or the buzzer.
Yes.
He is third baseman of the Texas Rangers. 0 for 1. All right, Mark
Dyke.
Dyke.
One. 1.
Number 1, Robert Woodward. The show's over at 10, so
Relax over there. We got an hour and 15 minutes to kill. I will say person you went to high school with.
He is a forward out of Mississippi State that is on the Pacers Summer League roster. We're off to a flying start here. All right, Sam Fritz, give me a number.
3, please.
Number 3, Corby Miller.
Corby Miller. That has Pacers Summer League written all over it.
Oh, boy, this is not going well.
Corby Miller, dude I went to high school with. Good guy, actually.
2.
You're behind me. 2 for you,
Yeah.
Mark Dykton.
Mm-hmm.
Ethan Thompson.
Oh, boy. Pacers Summer League player. Yes!
He is a forward out of Oregon State that's on the Pacers Summer League. We got one of them here, okay? Sam Fritz, give me a number.
We have 5 left still, right?
We have 4 left.
No, I mean the number 5.
Oh, the number 5 is
Yes.
still, yes, that is correct. Corbin Carroll.
Corbin Carroll, guy you went to high school with.
Come on, Sam.
Do you know Mark?
No, I don't know.
He's a left fielder for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
I just wanted him to get off the board.
Okay, we got 2 left here. I will give you, would you like number 4 or number 6, Mark Dykton?
Oh, give me number 4.
Number 4, Damon Houston.
Pacers Summer League player.
Damon Houston's my guy. Played with him at North Central. He went to Purdue. Good dude. All right, last one, Nathaniel Lowe.
Oh, I know this one.
Oh, yeah, that's a baseball player.
Yeah, baseball player.
I had to give you guys an easy one, right?
Hold on a second. Thank you.
Double click there, right? Pacers Summer League roster. Eli Brooks out of Michigan. Kendall Brown out of Baylor, who's been around for a while. Isaiah Jackson playing in the Summer League from Kentucky. Mojave King, who we talked about. Now he is.
You've talked about him a lot. Yeah.
What's that?
You've talked about him a lot. The desert jokes have been nonstop.
He can shoot from outside as if he's on a desert island. Nate Laszewski from Notre Dame, Benedict Mathurin. A little surprising that Mathurin's playing in Summer League.
Yeah, given that he had a really solid rookie campaign, but I mean, also he maybe just wants he wants to get that work in. He's got that dog in him, so maybe he wants to just get some Summer League reps in. And Nemhard also there, and as well as Isaiah Jackson too.
Darius McGee from Liberty, Ben Shepard, the draft pick out of Belmont, Ethan Thompson, who we just mentioned out of Oregon State. It's funny because Ethan Thompson, it says Oregon State and Puerto Rico. Oregon State had a power forward. What was his name from Puerto Rico that played in the Pan Am Games in '87? It was a pretty good player. Jorge Ortiz that was drafted. in the late 80s, also from Puerto Rico and Oregon State for that matter. Oscar Schwebe, that's the one that to me is really intriguing out of Kentucky because he was the National Player of the Year 2 years ago, as we know. A little bit undersized, 6'9", from an NBA standpoint, but a rebounding machine. And I think they are very curious to see what he can do on a two-way deal. Jarris Walker, of course, out of Houston, Isaiah Wong out of Miami, and Robert Woodard II out of Mississippi State. That is your Pacers Summer League roster. Mathurin, I did hear people, saying, like, I mean, come on, Mathurin, like, we know what he can do in the league. Now, does he need to play in the Summer League? Probably same true of Nembhard.
Yeah. I also
what those guys can do, but still, you want to kind of stay going. I get it.
I also wouldn't expect those guys to play full, they're not playing in every single game and they're not going to be playing full minutes. I mean, this is probably just to get some reps, in the offseason and all that. I don't expect them to be playing a ton of minutes in these Summer League games.
This from Scotty Johnston, by the way. The reason for the 1893 delineation for the Shohei status, because that's the first year the pitcher's mound was at its current distance of 60 feet 6 inches. What was the distance before then? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Was it closer or further?
I'm going to say closer.
That's a
complete guess.
You think? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know my 1893 baseball trivia too well.
I've always wondered this as well, okay? In 1893, how many teams were in... First off, the old George Carlin line. The first Major League Baseball team, Mark, was who?
The Brooklyn Dodgers, right?
No.
Oh, the Cincinnati Reds.
Correct.
I don't know why I said
so.
Brooklyn
Who did
Dodgers.
they play? Right?
Each other. It's like a split squad situation.
Clearly. Like, who'd they play? The Reds.
They ghost runners a lot of the time.
The other question then. Ghost runner on second. Ghost man on second. You hit a double. What happens?
Ghost runner scores.
Thank you. But back in those days, the travel, I think about that all the time.
Yeah, horse and buggy.
I mean, honestly, like...
There's a lot of dysentery back then.
The Cincinnati Redlegs are leaving on a 7-week, 2-game road trip, right? Like, what? How did they do that?
Lineup card been brought in by our Carrier Pigeon. Carrier Pigeon, sponsored by Western Union.
Honestly, the Pony Express delivering the team so that they can play from one game to the next. Like, stuff like that fascinates me, though. Am I the only one that thinks about stuff like this?
Probably. It's just you and Boo hanging out.
I asked
Boo.
the cat. He doesn't know. I'm like, Boo, enlighten me on this.
Licks himself and walks into another room.
That's good. Thank you.
It says here, and this is obviously Google, so this is probably wrong. It says the original baseball mound was 45 feet away.
Good Lord. Imagine Randy Johnson throwing at you from 45 feet away.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of birds dead on the ground. Yeah, that's probably a great thing that they moved that back. So I was right. It was closer. From the beginning of baseball in 1845 to 1880, the pitching distance was 45 feet. In the beginning, the pitcher had to throw the ball from behind a 12-foot line. In 1863, another 12-foot line 48 feet from home plate was added to create a pitcher's box. The dimensions of this box did not change for nearly 2 decades. There you go.
Okay, the 1893 Major League Baseball standings. Now, this is amazing.
And we are in June, if you can't tell.
Now, this is amazing to me, though. You know how many games they played in 1893 in Major League Baseball?
How many teams were there?
12.
48.
129 games.
Oh, that's excessive.
I mean, how long did it take the winner, by the way, at 86 and 43, the Boston Bean Eaters? The Boston Bean Eaters were the winners in 1893. They played 129 games. How long did it take the Boston Bean Eaters to go play the Louisville Colonels?
I don't know.
Like, how long was that road trip? Pittsburgh Pirates, Cleveland Spiders, Philadelphia Phillies, New York Giants, Cincinnati Reds, Brooklyn Grooms. You know, the Brooklyn Grooms. Don't take your kids to that game. Baltimore Orioles, Chicago Colts, St. Louis Browns, Louisville Colonels, and Washington Senators. There's your 1893 Major League Baseball standings.
Yeah, that had to be fascinating how that worked back then.
I mean, honestly, though, like, kidding aside, it is, you do wonder. I think sometimes we assume that life was far more primitive, like pre-20th century, than it really was. I mean, don't get me wrong. I realize it wasn't, the modern stuff, but I think that we think like they were 10 years removed from living in caves, and I don't think that was necessarily the case. Stephen Older joins us. We'll talk about the Colts training camp release and what to look forward to up in Westfield. He is going to join us next here on a Wednesday edition. Kevin and Corey, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
107.5 The Fan.
WIBC HD2 W298BB, WIBC HD3 W228CX, Indianapolis. The IndyCar Series races at Mid-Ohio, Sunday at 1. Brought to you by the Indiana Union Construction Industry. Skilled on principle, union by choice. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
It's Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Rolling along on a Wednesday, Jake Query, Mark Dykton here as well. Sam Fritz on the big board, Kevin Bowen back on Monday. And if you are planning on being outdoors today for activities, you might want to check. Children's Museum just announcing that outdoor activities for kids today are not going to open up because of the poor air quality due to the smoke from the Canada wildfires.
If it looks like that here, what does it look like in Canada right now?
I thought that. But I just saw, like in Toronto, the air quality, the measurement, I have no idea how they, I know what the number means, particles per whatever, but in Toronto it was 158. Right now in Indianapolis it's at like 225. The higher, the worse it is.
Right.
Bad stuff. Joining us now on the Payless Liquors Hotline from ESPN.com, the Colts writer Stephen Holder joins us. Stephen, first off, yesterday the Colts training camp schedule was released. Wednesday, July 26th will be the first opportunity for fans to be able to go out for camp kickoff. 10 to 11 a.m. will be practice. Then on Friday, the same. Obviously, not every day it is open to fan accessibility, I guess. But it does seem to me, and this is how I know I'm just getting older, it seems like camp gets lighter each year. Am I hallucinating that, or is there some accuracy to that? And I'm not saying that they need to do like the Junction Boys type stuff, but it seems like the days get shorter and shorter. Fact or fiction?
No, that's true. That is true. And first of all, I would quickly say to your previous point about the air quality. I drove through downtown yesterday, and I thought I had made a wrong turn. You could not see the skyline, like at all.
It's crazy, I know. And that was the same this morning, Stephen. I mean, it literally is like I told Mark earlier, like I felt like I was looking at the scene of some Will Smith apocalyptic fictional movie.
Exactly, it really did.
I mean, it is weird for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, no, you're not wrong about camp, and it's not just the Colts. To be clear, I mean, this is a league-wide trend. It's happening. It's happening at all levels. Even down to high schools, that some of the smarter coaches have, or at least the more open-minded coaches have also gone this way, not to the same extent. But the point is, yeah, I think with the Colts and with the rest of the NFL, frankly, if you look at the makeup of their staff today versus what it was maybe 20 years ago with most teams, you see positions that did not once exist. You know, things like sports scientists and dietitians and those kinds of things that were never a consideration in the past. The sports science has taken on such a prominent role that they are now fully integrated into everything that these teams do. And whether it proves to be true or not in the long run, we'll see. But the science is telling them that less is more. And you know, that doesn't have anything to do with whether your favorite team wins or loses, right? Because they're all doing it on some level. So it is easy to say, well, you know, they practiced less and then they had a bad season. Well, that may or may not happen. But I think in the long term, what the science tells them is this is going to be better for players' bodies and recovery and things like that, which directly affect performance. There's no doubt about it. So they are changing. I think the NFL was slow to happen, but I think if you remember back in the 2000s, you saw things like the Corey Stringer death, for example, in Minnesota, where I can remember, you know, being a sports writer at that time, and I was covering college football even at that moment, and you could see the sensitivity to that issue immediately kind of come to the forefront, you know, to heat exhaustion and things like that. And so we've traveled now, you know, to an even greater level of awareness 2 decades later to where we are now. So it's going to look a lot different, you know, if you're an old school football fan, but the goal is a noble goal.
ESPN Colts reporter Stephen Holder joining us on the Payless Liquors hotline this morning. Stephen, any thoughts on 8 of the 13 practices being morning practices. I believe Frank Reich had mostly like game time practice times. Any thoughts on that with Shane Steichen going with morning practices for the most part?
I'll say this: Frank Reich during training camp, actually, they used to go fairly early in training camp. Now during the season, he did have an approach of wanting to practice more so at game time. So that's true. But I think in camp, what they have done is really tried to beat the heat, and so I think that's twofold for the players and probably also for the fans to a lesser extent. I don't think they care as much about the fans, but I think they do care some. If they're asking people to drive to Westfield, you prefer it to be pleasant. So that's a factor there, and I think the days in training camp tend to be long as well. So. They're trying to get. I think you're trying to preserve players a little bit. If you have them practicing in the middle of the day, it becomes a longer day for them, probably just physically. So that's what's happening there. I do think that makes some sense. I mean, you don't have the same level of humidity at say 10 o'clock in the morning as you do at like 1 o'clock. The difference is pretty huge, obviously. So. I get it, and I think it goes back to a lot of what we were just talking about. It goes along the same lines. I can remember back in the day, for example, covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, for example. And when I first got on that beat, they were practicing at Disney Wide World of Sports before moving back to Tampa in a few years. But the point is, they would have two-a-days back then. They still had two-a-days back in the mid-2000s, and we'd go out there. I think the first practice was like 8:45, so it wasn't too bad. And then they had a second practice at like 3:15 in the afternoon. Have you ever walked outside in Florida in July at 3:15 in the afternoon? I mean, it was insane. You couldn't breathe out there with the humidity and all that. So teams have gotten a lot smarter about this, and I think a lot of teams are doing their training camp practices in the morning. Largely for these reasons. So, it all goes back to just being smart.
Steven, it's interesting because you hear a narrative almost every year with the Colts. If they get a couple of early injuries, people are like, why are the Colts the most injured team in the NFL? And I don't know that they are. And maybe there has just been bad luck. I don't know what it is. Yeah. Do you think there's anything that realistically can be done throughout camp one way or another to consistently, has there been any formula that has consistently shown to be one that keeps your team healthier than others?
No, it's a great question. And I do think every team's fan base thinks their team is the most injured team. That is true. Okay. However, I will also admit that as having covered the Colts now for 10 years, I mean, I've spent a lot of that time trying to figure out why their injury rates were high. They have been on the high side. That is true for many of those years. I think they feel like they've made some progress there, but I also don't know that it's attributable to anything necessarily. Maybe it is just luck. I don't know that they can say, well, we did this, we did X and Y happened, and we're really proud of ourselves. I don't think they can say that, and no one has identified any particular issue to me. So all you can do is do something different than you were doing and hope for different results. So that's why you have seen a change in training approach over the years from year to year. Sometimes you have seen changes that way. You've seen changes to the off season. I know that there have been off seasons where they've gone harder than others. This one was probably somewhere in the middle. I don't think they went ridiculously hard. They had, for example, their off season, their OTA practices. I mean, they were going about hour and 15 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, they were not very strenuous, and a lot of that is just individual work. They weren't going out there and going real hard and 11-on-11 work. So it all goes back to you're just trying to find that special sauce, but it's really elusive, and no one really has found it. The one thing I'd say is that there have been questions, and I'm sure you guys have talked about it. There have been questions about the Lucas Oil Stadium turf, and and they have done player surveys over the years that have not reflected kindly on whether that turf, it predisposes players to injury. I don't know that anything can be done about that.
Is it too deep? And by that I mean, Stephen, for those that are unfamiliar, the turf, you have the little rubber pellets that are basically a simulated dirt, and then the field play or whatever it's called, the turf itself. My fear would be, or my thought would be, that if it allows for you to plant too heavily, that then your foot is planting and your knee or your ankle is going in a different direction based on the plant.
Right.
Could that be it? Is it too soft or too deep?
I'm not sure exactly, to be honest. What I can tell you is that there has been some momentum toward I think a different type of turf. My understanding is, I believe they use it in European soccer a lot, and I forget the name right now. Forgive me, but people can Google this, and the information is out there. There are different types of turf that are in use. The NFL, most NFL teams do not use this other type of turf that supposedly is better geared, to protecting players. And here's the problem: is that replacing turf is very expensive. And if you're an NFL owner, there's not a lot of incentive for you to go and tear up your entire stadium's turf field and go put down another one. And then on top of that, your practice facility too, because that's just as important. In fact, that's where they spend most of their time, right? So you're talking about having to do it in two places, possibly on multiple fields at your practice facility, and you may or may not see some improvement. So it's not as if we can promise that will lead to improvement. But anyway, there have been studies done. I just think that even though we've been seeing turf fields used for a long time, on the whole, this is still relatively new. If you think about just the totality of time that we've been playing football, I mean, this is still on the newer side. And so I think we're still learning. And there's no doubt about it that field turf is something we need to look at very carefully and take a fresh approach to look at, I think, whenever possible.
Think about this. This is insane, okay?
Yeah.
For the first, I guess it would have been 20 years of existence, the Indianapolis Colts had their players playing on like a quarter-inch rollout skin rash that was sitting over concrete. I mean, it's amazing that Eric Dickerson can walk.
I agree. I mean, Barry Sanders did it on that kind of turf too. You know what I mean? It is amazing. And I remember, I never really understood it till I remember as a kid, my family had a good friend. We had good friends in Houston, Texas, and we went to visit them once. We were thinking about moving out there, and we ended up going to an Astros game, and we did not have a baseball team in South Florida at this time. And obviously, it being South Florida, there was no artificial turf. I had never even seen this stuff. So, we play outdoors, So, anyhow, go to the AstroTurf. Go to the Astrodome and sit in the outfield, pretty close up. And Willie McGee's out there running around on this stuff, and I'm like, this is carpet.
Totally.
It was shocking.
And it was like plastic carpet that was just like literally, if you get within 6 inches of it, you immediately get a rash. I mean, it was crazy.
It was shocking to me even as a kid.
Stephen, have you seen, on a side note, and we'll get back to the football in a second here, but this does interest me. Like, I just recently read an article about the Philadelphia Phillies of the early to mid-'90s and the number of players they've had that have either been stricken by or passed away from, like, brain tumors or cancer. And they believe that they don't know, but they theorize that it could be from the heat vapors that came off of the particular kind of turf they used in Veterans Stadium. And
wow.
Honestly, isn't that crazy? Like, because you're talking about basically melting plastic that you're standing
that's exactly
on.
What came to mind. Yeah, like it's like someone working on an assembly line, with around some hazardous chemical, and then 20 years later they got to sue, 3M to get their to get their medical bills paid or something. I mean, that's insane. I had not heard that. That is heavy. Wow.
Hey, when are we going to hear? And I know this is my weekly question. Stephen Holder's our guest on the Payless Siggers Hotline. You can read his work at ESPN.com covering the Colts. I realize, Stephen, I've asked you this probably weekly, but when, if at all, are we going to hear resolution on the Isaiah Rodgers story, or should this guy never have taken to Twitter?
No. I don't know what the resolution is going to be, but we continue to hear that it's going to be soon. I thought it might have been last week, frankly, and that did not happen. But I think it will be very soon. Not soon, but very soon, and potentially, from what I hear. Let's put it that way.
I'm guessing
no
Major
idea
League Baseball's All-Star break, maybe? Right when baseball's got their biggest summer league show off? Yeah.
That's right.
I'm thinking more like Friday at 5 or 4:59. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. But, yeah, I think that's kind of how the NFL does business. So, the Friday news dump is very frequently their preferred method. So we'll see. But I have not heard any specifics about what the resolution might be or what the decision might be. That I don't know.
Steven, what does a reasonable contract extension for Jonathan Taylor look like, and a request that he would throw out that the Colts would listen to? They're like, that's fair for both sides.
That's a great question, and it's a hard question. But they better figure it out, by the way, because this guy's not happy. I'm going to tell you, this is true. I've heard some more since his comments the other day, a couple of weeks ago. I've gotten some additional context around that, and he's really not happy. And I'm not saying that means you have to run and just give him whatever he wants. It's a negotiation. I get it. But I'm just saying, we've never seen this from Jonathan Taylor, the ultimate say the right thing and rah team guy. He's always to the point where, secretly among ourselves, the beat writers, we roll our eyes at him. I know I shouldn't say that publicly, but in a kidding kind of way, we roll our eyes. It's like, oh my God, Jonathan, say something. You guys have lost 14 games in a row. And he's always like, we just gotta keep playing hard, keep trying. And now this is the guy out there saying, damn it, pay me. I'm tired of this. It was shocking when you think about it from that perspective. The guy who would say nothing now is like, you guys are screwing me. And saying it publicly. That was shocking. I think people have to really understand that part. Anyway, to your question, I think the 3-year timeline has kind of been thrown around and I think has been popular. I kind of like that because I think you probably have, just based on what we know about running backs, you can probably realistically expect a couple more really good years from him. And then after that, it depends. You know what I'm saying? It depends on injuries, it depends on workload, it depends on a lot of things, right? Does he see decline? He's a guy who relies heavily on speed. When does that start to change? So those are all the variables when you start talking about the length of the contract. So I like that. I think the question has to be, what are we talking about on an average per year, and how much can you give them up front? Those are kind of, those are difficult things to figure out. But I do think somewhere in the, I don't know, I think over the first 2 years, I think if you're him, you want to get somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 million if you're him. That doesn't mean he's making $20 million a year. I'm just saying, in what he takes to the bank over the first 2 years, you'd like that to be, if just throwing it out there off the top of my head, you'd like it to be 35 to 40 million, and then the last year can just be kind of whatever. But that would involve, once you factor in the signing bonus and things like that, I think it's pretty. I don't think it's real hard to get to that number. So what's the total number? I don't know. Is it 45? Is it 48? Is it 50? That kind of depends on how you structure it. But the big thing, if I'm his agent, most of the time, if you're talking about a multi-year contract, what you care about is what you get on day one and what you're going to get over the first 2 years, 3 years, if it's a longer contract, that kind of thing. So for a 3-year deal, I would highlight what he gets in the first couple of years. And if you're the Colts, those are the years you care about, because once you get to year 3 for a running back who's on a second contract, that's when you start to have to assume nothing.
It's Kevin and Query, ESPN Colts reporter Stephen Holder joining us on the Payless Liquors hotline for another couple minutes. Stephen, I want to circle back to what you said about Jonathan Taylor's unhappiness. Does that have more to do with outplaying his contract or more seeing the landscape of the running back situation in the NFL right now where he's seeing other veteran guys, Dalvin Cook getting released, Ezekiel Elliott still out of a job, Austin Eckler fighting with the Chargers, Najee Harris fighting with the Steelers, Saquon Barkley fighting with the Giants? Is that more to do with he's seeing the state of running back and kind of like, okay, I better get my money while I can? What's going on there?
I think it's both. I think it's both. Look, there have been, if you go back to 2021, for instance, that team ultimately, failed at the end of the season. But let's just talk about the impact Jonathan Taylor had that year. Where are they without him? We could talk about Carson Wentz, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, blah, blah, blah. Let's be honest, okay? The only reason that team moved the ball was Jonathan Taylor, okay? let's not even pretend. That's why they moved the football that year. And he paid for it with having a physical setback last year. This guy has 330 carries, something along those lines. Running backs with over 300 carries very rarely have a good follow-up season. And I did the research on this. And he was well over 300 that year, and he paid a price for it. And so I think he's looking at it from a workload standpoint. And if I don't get it now and then I have another big workload this year, where does that leave me? I would be very reluctant to get out there and want to carry the ball 250, 300 times this year if you're Jonathan Taylor and not get my money. I would be aghast at having to do that.
But, Stephen, my thing is this. Do you get return on investment?
Well, that's a fair question. I think now there's two ways of looking at this.
From a production standpoint, statistically, yes. But does that translate into wins in 2023 in the National Football League?
That's the fair question, and it is a totally fair question. I think as it relates to Jonathan Taylor, what you have to do is you have to ask yourself, okay, because I think the running back position in general, right, we can kind of answer that question. And the answer to your question is not necessarily, because they are largely interchangeable, and that's why teams have taken this approach. We can just plug guys in. If we got a good blocking scheme, we're going to run the ball. And that's been proven relatively true. The question the Colts have to ask, and what Jonathan Taylor's case likely is that, well, I'm different. And I think there's a case to be made for that. I'm not your average running back. I do think for him, if I'm his agent, I'm not. If I'm his agent, though, the case I make is that, look, this guy is a big play player. Okay? He's a big play player. And that kind of separates him from, the guys who maybe have a lot of yardage, but maybe are, sort of 4 yards or 5 yards a carry, and they just kind of consistently move the chains. That's great, but that's not going to win you games. Jonathan Taylor can make big plays that do win you games. He has done that. And so I think that's been his biggest calling card. So that, to your question, it's not as straightforward. Does it translate? It's not as straightforward with Jonathan Taylor because of the kind of player he is. Now, then the question becomes, will he continue to be that player? He was hurt last year, and he was not that player. So, but that's the nature of doing these contracts. You're projecting, and that's a hard thing to do. I think it's a hard negotiation. I said this a long time ago, and it's proven to be true. This was going to be a hard negotiation, and here we are.
Okay, most critical question to wrap it up for you, Stephen. You ready? A little peek behind the curtain for people in midsummer content here on Sports Talk Radio. Probably most would be stunned to know this, except for the cultured nature of the two of us. When not talking about the Colts on the radio, you and I take in Broadway musicals together. This is a fact.
Well, well, singular, not plural. But
okay, well,
it has happened. Yes,
we have others that are on the docket here that may be up and coming. I'm interested to see To Kill a Mockingbird in January, for example. Disney's Frozen, probably not of interest to me. Tina Turner, there's a musical about Tina Turner coming up in April that's coming here. at any rate, the most recent that came through that we saw at Clues, the two of us saw, was Ain't Too Proud, which was the story of the Temptations. In your, I don't know how many Broadway shows you have seen, you would rank it where? Would that be like average, slightly above average, below average, or good, very good, etc.?
Look, as I admitted before, I'm not the authority, but I would tell you, in my from my uncultured point of view, I thought it was excellent. Like, I had no expectations, and I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I really was surprised because I went in with no expectations, really kind of not knowing what we were getting into. I thought it was fantastic. The performances were great.
Yeah, and I didn't.
You are much more of a I think expert on this. So
theater nerd, you can say it.
No, right. No, but he does know more than me about this, and I thought you felt the same way, right?
Yeah, I thought it was really well done. It's interesting because Stephen, as you and I were talking about when we were in the audience, for me personally, the Temptations certainly, they're one of those. They're an iconic, obviously, Motown act, and the number of songs, there were several songs in it that I'm like, you know what, I'd forgotten this was the Motowns. The Temptations. I would have thought it was the Supremes or the Platters or another Motown act. I thought the story was fascinating. I didn't realize the backstory, not only of the band, but some of the conflict within the band, the loyalty within the band. So I thought it was really well done. And then I always think to myself, Stephen, and this is why I wish people could take their younger people to see shows. As I was watching the performance and listening to the performers sing the songs of the Temptations, that many of them sounded exactly like the Temptations, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, probably a percentage of the people that I'm sitting here watching perform on stage that are getting a standing ovation were like outcasts in their high school graduating class, or were just like the forgotten, nerds or whatever else. You know what I mean? Like, to use those high school terms. And here they are, right? I mean, and then you think to yourself, like, there are a lot of really talented people out there, man. Really talented people.
Yeah, I thought about, those theater kids, like you said, in high school, that they maybe get made fun of. Well, now they're on stage, getting standing ovations from thousands of people, which is kind of cool,
Totally.
So I did think about that.
Yeah, totally. It was very cool. Well, Stephen, we appreciate the time as always. Be safe today. Honestly, stay inside, man. It's ugly out.
Yeah, it's ugly out there.
It's been a long time since I've said that, if ever, before about smoke, but that's the reality of it. Stephen, appreciate it.
Okay, guys. Take care.
Stephen Holder from ESPN.com on the Payless Liquors Hotline.
Now I'm seeing how much Frozen is going to cost me this fall.
Oh, you didn't know it was there?
No. But
how much is it?
I don't know. But I'm shuddering right now.
So my parents have season tickets to the Broadway Indianapolis shows, and I mean, it's fabulous. We've seen, I saw Ain't Too Proud. We saw Hamilton. We saw From Far Away. We saw, there was another one, Hairspray, Rent. I've probably seen 10. The Lion King.
Okay.
I think I've seen 10 total. It was really good. The one about the Temptations was really good.
I've seen a few back in my day. Haven't been gone recently, but since kids. But we've seen a few. We saw Wicked.
So are you going to go see Disney's Frozen?
Probably. I'm sure that'll be a big hit for the girls. So yeah, probably.
Time, by the way, for a morning check down.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
We shall begin in baseball. The Indianapolis Indians are in Louisville to take on the Bats in International League play tonight at 6:35. I don't know if Buddy and Buddy's Buddy.
What? Are you okay? You keep saying the word Buddy.
You gotta get the joke out. You gotta get the joke out, bud.
I can't think about the Louisville Bats without thinking about Buddy's Buddy. Sorry.
Say that story again for those that aren't aware.
I've told the story like 1,000 times.
Well, what's one
There's
more?
no way that anybody doesn't know. I went with Dave First 25 years ago to a Louisville Bats game. We went to a Reds game, and they were like, let's go to the Louisville Bats game. Let's drive over to Louisville and go to their game, make it a doubleheader. And then we got there, and by the third inning, we're like, what are we doing? We're slap happy. We've been there forever. We went to the Reds game earlier in the day. We're tired. So we're there. They're playing the Syracuse Sky Chiefs. We are intentionally acting like diehard Sky Chiefs fans, annoying the crowd. And the Louisville Bats mascot is a bat, like a not a bat,
right.
like a Louisville Slugger, like a
the flying kind.
Correct, the flying
the
rodent.
Michael Keatons.
And so Buddy is his name, and in like the fifth, I don't know, it might have been the seventh inning stretch. So like, okay, kids, it's time for Buddy, and Buddy's trusted assistant was a portly fellow named Buddy's Buddy. He had a little jersey that says Buddy's Buddy. So Buddy comes out on a go-kart and is doing hot laps around the diamond, and he goes in the left center, and the left side rubber gets onto actually it would have been the right side. Got a little bit on the grass, a little off the warning track. He took it a little hot into the corner, and the go-kart flipped about 8 feet in the air, to which it landed on top of Buddy, who's laying, and you could see his little wing kind of flapping. And kids are aghast in horror and screaming and terrified at this horrible sight. Wheels are still spinning. They're zooming out from the Jumbotron. And First and I are laughing uncontrollably. You can hear our laughter somewhere between Jeffersonville and Scottsburg. And then the PA guy comes on and says, "Don't worry, kids. Buddy's on his way out." And the little portly fella had to sprint from the dugout all the way out to center field and help lift the go-kart.
His wings just got clipped.
Buddy and his wings eventually. I think he was okay. He was okay.
I haven't been to a Louisville Bats game yet at Louisville, but I'll have to go and look for him.
Do you know why he had the accident?
Why?
He's blind as a bat.
Oh, God.
Phillies over the Cubs yesterday, 5-1. It was the Pirates over the Padres, 9-4. Mets over the Brewers, 7-2. Dodgers over the Rockies. But most importantly, the Cincinnati Reds back in first in the National League Central because they beat Cute Fella and the Orioles 3-1 in Baltimore last night. Milwaukee now surrenders back the lead in the NL Central because the Brewers yesterday, did they play yesterday or were they idle?
The Brewers?
Yeah.
I think they were off. They lost to the Mets 7-2.
Oh, I just said that, didn't I?
Yeah.
That's why the Reds are back in first place in the NL Central. Guardians over the Royals 2-1. It was the Rangers over the Tigers 8-3. Athletics over the Yankees 2-1, and Mark's Diamondbacks 8-4 winners.
Hell yeah.
Yesterday.
Pretty quiet elsewhere in the world of sports. Indiana Fever off today. They will take on the Phoenix Mercury in Arizona to wrap their 3-game road trip tomorrow night. That tip-off is at 10 o'clock. Pacers also announced their summer league roster, notably Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nemhard, and Isaiah Jackson, all on the summer league roster. Not sure how much playing time they'll all get, but they were 3 of the 15 men announced for the roster there.
Speaking of the NBA, when we return, the NBA free agency about to get underway, and the list of free agents, including those that might be of interest to the blue and gold, and those that might be of interest to people that I would say proceed with caution. We'll get into all of that on the other side on this Wednesday edition of Kevin and Query, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. this does, Mark, or does not sound familiar to you?
This part does, yeah. I don't think I would have ever associated it with This Week in Baseball.
Where else would you have heard it?
At a wedding, it sounds like. Sounds very, very celebrational. Celebratory, if you will. Yeah, right there.
The best, man. While the credits are rolling, you're watching Ron Say rounding third in slow motion. We talked earlier about good This Week in Baseball to lead off the show. That's why I'm playing that. Good morning to you. Jake Query here along with Mark Dykton, Sam Fritz. We are inside the DriveHubler.com studios on Monument Circle here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. NBA free agency. Some of the free agents that are out there, Mark, are guys that I simply list as like proceed with caution.
Right. I see a couple already that I'm like, yeah, no thank you.
One of those is intriguing to me. Now, not for the Pacers, because his price tag is going to be massive. But a guy that I always felt like, there are certain players in NBA history that were just fabulous scorers, but it never necessarily translated into winning. They were great players to watch. I'm not saying they were bad players, but they were dynamic talents that always were just kind of surrounded by other dudes. Bernard King comes to mind. Dominique Wilkins comes to mind. I actually always felt that of Tracy McGrady, and I know that that's kind of he's a polarizing figure. But James Harden for me was that guy to a great extent. And then last year, I actually thought James Harden really kind of redeemed himself is maybe the wrong way of saying it, but I was impressed by him because I always felt like James Harden was just a scorer and that was it. Like there are guys that understand how to score and guys that understand how to play the game. And some guys, you can be a scorer and not be a great player. And I know that sounds crazy. But you can be a great scorer and not really have any idea how to do other aspects or areas of basketball that helps win games. And I always kind of felt that about James Harden. But then last year, in watching him more closely, perhaps, or just watching the playoffs and et cetera, I thought to myself, you know what? I've got to give a mea culpa here because I think he is more selfless than I had originally thought. Maybe he hasn't always been that way. Maybe it's playing with Joel Embiid and the other complementary pieces in Philadelphia, which there are some good ones. I don't think he's worth, because I don't necessarily think that anybody's worth the price tag that you're talking about, and I don't mean that from like a social commentary standpoint, more so just in this salary cap era, unless you want to pay a lot in the luxury tax, it's difficult to juggle or come up with a roster when you're paying one guy, $45 million a year. James Harden, for example, has a player option 35.6. He's going to have a hit, I think, of like 34. I mean, he's way up there, right? Mm-hmm. But he is one of them that I think I would say proceed a little bit with caution. There is another that jumps out to me. Would you like to guess which?
That you like but would proceed with caution with?
Yes. There is one
Draymond Green?
Okay, that's Draymond Green would be. Would you take Draymond Green?
For the Pacers?
Just in general, if you are an NBA franchise.
I would take him over like Kyrie Irving, I think, at this point.
See, Kyrie Irving to me is the one that zero chance.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah, there's too much drama that comes with them. Lots of outside activities and all that stuff that's just drama you don't need because it's just gonna bleed into the locker room and bleed into the press conferences and all that stuff.
Let me give you two others. Draymond Green, I'm going to put in the same category as another guy. I think Draymond Green has been a great player for Golden State, and he brings an it factor that is very hard to replicate. And Reggie Miller said it once best: you need a little bit of crazy on your roster. But crazy goes a long way. And I don't think Draymond Green's crazy per se, but he clearly I can't speak to what he was like as a younger player. You know, he went after Jordan Poole. We know about that and how much that I think fractured that locker room. Some may say that Jordan Poole was the issue there and not Draymond Green. You know, I don't know. Except for that Draymond Green, you know, I go back to when I was a kid and I was a diehard IU basketball fan, and I would watch Gene Cady have temper tantrums, and I said to my dad once, why does everybody get on Bob Knight, but Gene Cady does the same thing and nobody talks about it? And my dad said, well, it's because Bob Knight has developed that reputation for himself, and you eventually set the standard on what people are going to think about you based on your behavior. He was right. And Draymond Green's the same way. Like, Draymond Green and Jordan Poole can get into a shoving match, or even more so than that, on tape, and Jordan Poole might be the biggest puke on the planet. I have no idea. But Draymond Green loses benefit of the doubt because of his reputation, because of his previous behavior. Green, to me, has been a wonderful player for Golden State because he is in absolutely the right system to springboard off of what he does well. He's an excellent facilitator from the high post. He's a very good passer. He's obviously a defender. He irritates other guys on the other team. He does a lot of things well. But, Mark, I think that he does a lot of things well for Golden State. And I don't know that necessarily you airdrop him into any franchise and he is the same player.
I think the demand of what he would be asked to do would be greater on any other team other than Golden State. I think that's where...
That's a very good way of saying it, yes.
That's where the issue will come, is you'll be thinking more point scoring and all that stuff, and that's not what Draymond Green does. He's facilitating to Steph Curry, to Klay Thompson.
Yes, whatever limitation he may have is masked in Golden State and would be exposed the more you ask of him. Now, another guy that fits that mold for me...
Can I have one guess? I think I know who it is this time.
A guy that I think has developed a nice career, made a lot of money, and increased his perceived value by being in the right system. And I don't know that it translates automatically from any one franchise to the next. Like, there are certain players, Mark, LeBron James is going to be great anywhere he goes. You know, Giannis is going to be great anywhere he plays. There is another guy to me that is in the Draymond Green category of he's a wonderful player because of where he is. Your guess.
Well, now I'm changing it the way you brought it up. I'm going to say Chris Middleton.
Middleton's a good player, but I think Middleton has peaked.
The original guess was Dylan Brooks, but the way you promoted that, I'm like, I don't think you're talking about Dylan Brooks.
I mean, I don't know. Where does Dylan Brooks end up?
I don't know. So have at it. Who are you talking about?
He's got a sister named Greta that's a musician.
Van Vliet?
Yes.
Yeah, I like him a lot.
You do like him?
I do like him a lot.
I think that Fred VanVleet, to me, one of those guys that, like, and maybe I'm not giving him enough credit. I mean, I think he's obviously he's a very good player. But I think he's a very good player that was kind of tabbed or labeled as a franchise player, and he got paid as such, and I'm not sure that I would go back and sign him to a big ticket again.
It will be interesting to see what he goes. Yeah, he is a free agent. The Raptors didn't move him at the NBA draft, so he is free to go wherever he'd like. I'm very curious to see who's interested and what that price tag is going to be for him. But I've always liked Fred VanVleet. He's always one of those guys where from a distance I'm always like, I like what he does. I know he struggled a bit shooting last year and stuff, but I've always had a soft spot for Fred VanVleet. I don't know if it's just because the Raptors, when they were on that playoff run for a couple of years, he was always one of the leaders in that team and stuff. But Fred VanVleet is going to be very interesting to see who he goes to and what he gets paid. What is his worth around the league?
How about Cam Johnson?
He's fine.
He's restricted.
Yeah, he's fine. Yeah,
doesn't cost you a lot. I like him. I think versatile's. He kind of does what Indiana needs, right? I'm talking about for the Pacers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's not bad. Another one I was looking at for the Pacers possibly, and I don't know, they have some pretty decent depth there, so I'm not sure. Jeremy Grant from the Trailblazers. I've always liked him a lot.
Yeah,
I've always liked him a lot too. He's one that I would kind of circle. Kyle Kuzma has been brought up as possible for the Pacers and whatnot, so it'll be interesting to see who they are targeting in free agency, because we were going over the roster the other day. That rosters that the Pacers have, it's a lot of young guys, but a lot of depth at positions. So curious to see where they're kind of circling as to what they think is the weakest part of their roster and how they're going to hopefully upgrade that in free agency.
We have yet to mention the one that probably is the target for the Pacers that could end up here, and that's Harrison Barnes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm going to admit to now we already got into the fact that I admitted, or you admitted for me, that I go to Broadway musicals a lot, which I do love them. I always have a good time when I go to them, and I'm always marveled by the talent at them. About 5 years ago, I don't even know how it came to be, Mark. I'm not a fantasy sports player. Fantasy football, we had our team here, and it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
The Kevin and Query League was fun.
Probably going to re-up that this year, I think.
Except for the one fella that was wanting to trade constantly and sending. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was insane.
Right? Oh, yeah. Every other day, it was 10 different trades, and it was like 10 players for one.
Yeah.
Like, what in the world?
Right. But the one several years ago, on my own, I just went onto a public league on ESPN.com and did fantasy basketball, NBA fantasy basketball, for the mere purpose of it gave me reason to follow each and every week the game, each night. I mean, what reason would I have to see what happened between Minnesota and Portland? Except for that, I got so-and-so on my fantasy league. And I was like, I get way into it. Last year, as a matter of fact, I was 19-1. I won my league, dominating fashion. Very active on the free agency wires, trades. But for the last 3 years on my team, not a keeper league, I've had Harrison Barnes. I say all of this only to say, as a result of that, I was kind of monitoring or in tune with Harrison Barnes' NBA production. And he is a good player. He is inconsistent. Not necessarily maddeningly inconsistent, though, because his production is based on the nights that he's needed to be productive. And by that I mean he could give you 20, 25. There are nights where he does it, but it was typically when Sabonis was out or De'Aaron Fox was out or where they needed scoring elsewhere. Other than that, his role essentially was he is I think a quality teammate, a consistent shooter, not overly quick. He can guard a little bit. He's getting older for sure.
Just turned 31.
But I think he is I'm trying to think of Pacer players. You remember when the Pacers got Al Jefferson?
Yeah.
Al Jefferson was a huge talent in his early younger years, and then the shelf fell pretty quick. Harrison Barnes is a different kind of player than Al Jefferson. Don't get me wrong. He's not a 4 like Jefferson or a 5. But he's kind of a 3-4 guy. But I think his role would be similar to Al Jefferson. When the minutes are called upon, he can provide them. But he is more so there for just kind of the veteran leadership, stability, and in particular quite frankly, to appease Tyrese Halliburton.
He would definitely be that, especially when you look at the rest of the Pacers roster. He'd be the veteran old guy in the room at 31 years old, which is crazy to say. But, yeah, they've got quite the youth movement going on for the Pacers.
I do think, by the way, that Harrison Barnes, I think right now, if you were like putting a wager on it, that the Pacers are the clubhouse leader to end up acquiring Harrison Barnes, unless something's happened that I'm unaware of in the last 24 hours.
That's the name I've heard the most.
And the Mad Ants might be the leader for Dylan Brooks.
We'll have to see. We'll see what happens.
I mean, what a knucklehead that guy is.
Yeah.
Park in Westfield this Friday.
Giants, Mets, Sunday Night Baseball. The coverage begins at 6 on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You're listening to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
This was This Week in Baseball's, like, cool and collected segment, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Light up a cigar. Let's show you some highlights of some double plays.
I thought you were going to say, actually, they do. Now, let's take a look at some of the highlights from around the American League. It's the best. This Week in Baseball was the best. I was just talking about the fact that you can get a bathroom conversion from Bath R Us, bathrus.com, by the way. And with a lot of things, once you get done with it, you look back on it and you're like, how did I not think of that before? Why did I not think of that before? And actually something happened in the world of news recently that I thought to myself, duh, how did I not think of that before? The answer was right there before my very eyes the entire time. And I'll tell you what it was next.
Hey, it's JMV. Later on this afternoon is a can't miss live at brand new Walk-Ons on South Meridian. Cannot wait to see you there. The latest NBA, Pacers rumors, and Mark Sheldon talks Reds too. That's today at 3.
You're listening to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Interesting that we would play Walk of Life, which is a great song, great music video, because you just heard JMV mention Walk-Ons. Today, he will be there. That's at 247 South Meridian doing his show. I think I'm going to swing by as well, right here in downtown, and see John, and I think some of the folks from work are going to be there as well, so look forward to that. Mark, we talked the last time that you and I were in here together, I think. Not sure how long ago that was. We talked about athletes that would be good replacements for Pat Sajak on Wheel of Fortune.
Uh-huh.
And the whole time, you know, it almost feels like there was this search for the next Pat Sajak, and then they announce who it is, and you're like, oh, yeah, I mean, that was pretty obvious from the get-go.
Yeah, we tried to put a sports spin on it, but obviously the Wheel of Fortune folks were like, yeah, I think we'll go with the safe and easy route.
So Ryan Seacrest is the guy, and here's the thing about Ryan Seacrest. There's nothing about him that, I mean, he's a nice-looking guy.
Moisturizes probably as much as you do.
To me, that's right. To me, there's nothing about him that jumps out at me as being like this overly talented individual, except for, he's pretty polished, pretty smooth. But he has a very unique quality about him. And maybe I'm totally misreading it. People can feel free to text or tweet me and tell me if they disagree with this. But I think there's a unique characteristic or quality that somebody has that Ryan Seacrest possesses. Now, let me give you an example, Mark. Give me like an uber famous person in American culture, just like an uber famous person.
Oprah.
Okay, Oprah Winfrey. Oprah actually possesses this same characteristic as Ryan Seacrest. If you ran into Oprah Winfrey, if you were walking through the Water Tower place in Chicago and Oprah Winfrey was like walking along checking her phone and you're like, oh my gosh, that's Oprah Winfrey. And you said like, Oprah, oh my gosh, what do you think her reaction would be?
You get a car.
Yeah, I mean, her reaction would be like seemingly her reaction would be like, well, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
What's your name?
Yeah.
And like you kind of feel like you know Oprah Winfrey, right? Like everybody's like, oh yeah, Oprah. Like she's on a first name basis with everybody.
Right.
Now there are other television or music or entertainment personalities that, like Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp is like uber cool, but Johnny Depp seems like the type that, like, if you saw him, you'd be like, I don't know if I want to go up and say something to him or not, because this guy may be like, you know, he may like snarl at me and walk away. I have no idea. There's a very unique characteristic, and it in itself is probably a true talent, where Ryan Seacrest, like when you watch American Idol, and I know it's been a while since that show was really in vogue, but if you watched American Idol, people get up there in front of the judges and they're like super nervous to meet or talk to Katy Perry, or they're super nervous to meet or talk to Lionel Richie, or, you know, predating that, like obviously Simon Cowell, okay? But then they leave that room and Ryan Seacrest, they're just like, oh yeah, it's just Ryan Seacrest. Well, Ryan Seacrest is like probably more ubiquitous than half of them. But
He's been around the longest on that show, that's for sure.
Right, and he's on everything, right? Yeah. But Ryan Seacrest has this unique characteristic where people consider him the safety zone. He's like the friend zone to America. I don't know that anybody is like, I'm a diehard fan of Ryan Seacrest, but you don't meet anybody that's like, that guy's arrogant and a jerk. Mm-hmm. People just naturally, I think it's an ultimate compliment to someone of celebrity status that people don't get uber geeked to meet them, because they feel like, I just know him. This is Ryan Seacrest. Yeah, I know Ryan. Hey, Ryan, what's up?
Yeah, I think you're kind of like, well, this guy's just everywhere. Like he did do the show with Kelly Ripa. He does American Idol. He's doing Wheel of Fortune now. He's got a radio show. He does the Dick Clark New Year's Eve countdown. Like he kind of sprays to all fields where he's just kind of everywhere all at once. And so you're like, oh yeah, he's comfortable because he's everywhere already. I see him on my TV constantly or on my radio or something. So,
and you know what? He may be, I have no idea, Mark. He might be the most difficult diva on the planet. I have no idea. But his perception, his brand is that he's just the everyday guy. He's just the dude you went to high school with. Like, oh yeah, that's Ryan. We went to high school together. That's how he comes across. And like, and I think that like on a game show, and Pat Sajak had that. I mean, to an extent, Pat Sajak has of late become kind of smarmy, but that's kind of the charm to him, because now he's like the old guy that's like, you know, I've been around a while. But like when you're on a game show, you know, there's a certain skill set that comes on a game as a game show host. People are on there playing. I think it's so easy to watch Wheel of Fortune and be like, this guy's an idiot. How does he not know that the answer is Austin, Texas? He's only missing one vowel, you know, whatever. But when you're in there and the lights are on and the camera's rolling and and the red light's on and you start to freeze a little bit, Pat Sajak's very good at kind of keeping people calm about that, right? Alex Trebek always kind of got joked about as being smarmy, but that was because he wasn't. He was the opposite of that. Ken Jennings, smarmy, right? He's smarmy.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have somebody in that position where people just feel comfortable and like feel like they're just there, like with their buddy hanging out on the weekend in a garage playing cornhole, and that's how he comes off.
Yeah,
so
I could see that.
It seemed like a no-brainer now in hindsight.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we try to put a sports spin on it, but yeah, obviously Seacrest was a choice that if you would have said non-sports related, I probably would have put on that list, to be quite honest. But the fact that he is going to be the Pat Sajak apprentice, I guess, as you call it, following his footsteps, you're like, okay, we'll add that to another.
Do you know what he makes a year, Ryan Seacrest?
Oh, I'm guessing it's in the 20 million range or something.
Bro.
Well, the amount of tax forms he has to fill out, he's got like 8 different jobs.
I mean, 20.
You're saying more?
That's you just mentioned August.
Well, he's got the radio show. He's no longer, but he was this year on Ryan and Kelly.
Okay, I was way off.
Clearly, Mark just looked it up. Well, I mean, you've got. Does he still do a morning radio show in L.A.?
I thought he was Sirius XM.
Yeah, I think Sirius XM now. Holy moly, I was way off.
What are we looking at?
This says $75 million per year.
Yeah.
He's a net worth around $430 million.
Yeah.
And what's the other guy from the original American Idol doing now? Nothing.
What do you mean? What other guy?
Exactly. You remember when American Idol first started?
I only watched
Ryan Seacrest and the other guy, and then the other guy left, and then Ryan Seacrest is just. I'm gonna look it up now. Who is the other guy?
Dunkelman is his last name. I know that.
Yeah.
So what was his role on American Idol?
He was kind of like another Ryan Seacrest. It was just he was there.
Was Seacrest already a big deal by then?
No, it was the very first season. No one knew who they were, and so it was Seacrest and this other guy, Dunkelman or whatever, and. I think it was like after the second season, he was gone. And then, Brian Dunkelman, famous for being the co-host with Ryan Seacrest on the first season of American Idol. He now makes his living as an Uber driver.
Come on.
That's what it says.
So why did he leave the show? On his own?
I don't know. I don't remember. I just remember
because his last name was Dunkelman?
I didn't watch American Idol a ton, but I remember I knew who that was. And I was like, oh, that guy's gone. And I was like, okay, it's the second season of a show, whatever. And then you see Ryan Seacrest rise to, making money hand over fist. And then this guy's driving an Uber.
That says he's a comedian.
Well, I know, but,
And so he drives an Uber.
Right, exactly.
Good point, Sam. Very good point. Okay, I mean, so the only time I watched here's my problem with American Idol. And I don't even know if it's still on. But America's Got Talent, American Idol, The Voice, all of those. The problem I have with those shows, problem's the wrong word, I guess, but where I get hesitant is now we're saturated with the winners. Like people like the people that go on. I watched a season of American Idol, one season of it, and it is fun to watch. I mean, you watch it and you get invested a little bit, and you're like, okay, I want to see how this person does. And they always have like the heart-wrenching stories of the girl whose grandmother on her deathbed handed her a guitar for the first time, and the girl instantly became Dolly Parton.
Grandma's dying and she's handing you a 6-string.
It's always that kid.
I thought of you.
That's it. That's honestly what happens. They take these stories. They're always like in West Virginia, right? And they have these people in they're they have the little vignette and then they come out on the stage in front of Lionel Richie and they start crying or Simon Cowell or Randy Jackson, whatever. So I watched it one season and
I thought you'd like this Gibson, Angela. Grandma, don't go.
I'm telling you, that's what they do. Maybe they make the stories up. I don't know. But at any rate, when I watched it, there was a girl named Megan something that had arm tattoos, and she was like kind of a goofy singer. And the guy that won it, actually the runner-up, and this was always the case too, it's the runner-up that goes on to be the most famous one. I guess kind of like the Dunkelman fella.
Well, not in the Kelly Clarkson and Justin, whatever his name is, the guy who's doing the Dr. Pepper commercials.
The year that I watched it, the guy that won American Idol worked at a paint store. And I think now he's working at a paint store. His name was Lee DeWise. He won it. The runner-up was that Adam Lambert, who's like gone on to he's
with Queen now.
Correct. I mean, he absolutely took off. Look up Adam Lambert's net worth, and I'll look up the net worth of Lee DeWise. And then
25 to 35 million.
That's his net worth.
Yeah.
There was that Ruben Stoddard or something. He was like the defending winner of the year that I watched it. And then there was some fella named something Hicks.
Taylor Hicks.
Taylor Hicks. So that guy is from Birmingham, and 1 year at the IndyCar race, he was the Grand Prix of the IndyCar Birmingham race, and then he went on television and the pre-race, and they said, "So how excited are you to be here?" And he said, "Oh man, I love Formula One." It was like, okay, and he also got dropped from his label, right?
I don't know.
I'm looking up Lee DeWy's net worth. First thing that comes up is Lee DeWy's "Where is he now?" That is typically not necessarily like the way that you want things to go. He has a net worth of $500,000. Not bad. And a couple cans of paint.
Interesting.
So anyways, Ryan Seacrest now Wheel of Fortune host. But that doesn't it seem now, is he going to do the other shows?
I would imagine so. Well, I think we looked it up before where Wheel of Fortune tapes like 6 episodes a day for like 3 days, and they have like a full month of shows. So I think that, he's carve it out in his schedule.
Okay. Who's the best Family Feud host of all
Steve
time?
Harvey, without question.
Ooh.
Without question.
Hold on.
Not only is he the best Family Feud host, he's the best game show host of all time.
Jeff Probst would like a word. Different kind of game
Jeff
show.
Probst, get out of here.
Wait a minute. Bob Barker?
No. You know the pet community hates Bob Barker?
Excuse me?
Spay and neuter your pets?
Why would that? You mean the pets?
The pet community, yes.
So
the pet community. The cats and dogs are like, that guy's a jerk.
Okay. So does, who is it? Happy Gilmore doesn't like him either?
Yeah.
No, wait a minute. Family Feud, though. You got Ray Combs.
Who?
He unfortunately.
He got the buzzer?
He had a sad ending.
Oh, okay.
Ray Combs lived in India at one time, I think. He did something here in Indianapolis. Richard Dawson? How can you? Oh, come on, man.
No.
How can you? Richard Dawson is the best ever to do Family Feud, and there is no. And I love Steve Harvey.
Steve Harvey.
Yeah, the fella
put that show.
Didn't Louis Anderson do it for a semester or for a season? I mean, it was about a semester.
Louis Anderson, give me pork rinds.
Do you remember when Louis Anderson was on? Rest his soul. They had one of these made up game shows where they had to dive into. It was a diving competition.
Yeah, that was like near the end of Louis.
Louis couldn't get out of the pool.
I know.
Do you remember? He dove in, and like, how do you go on a diving show if you forget that you don't know how to swim?
Well, also, you're trying to make the smallest splash possible, and what are we doing with Louis Anderson? I'm just saying. Like, the producers knew what they were doing there. Hey.
Well, they had that. They knew what they were doing because Catherine Webb, was that her name? A.J. McCarron's now wife. It was right on the heels of when like Brent Musburger oogled over her so they knew they had a show where they could put her in a bathing suit.
Mm-hmm.
They had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on there, and then Louis Anderson, and I'm like, really? And Louis jumped in, and then like I think they had to like call the paramedics. It was not a good situation. Ray Combs. Hold on, Richard Dawson, Louis Anderson, the guy that played. What's the guy's name that played? Jay Peterman.
Oh, I know who you're talking about, but yeah, I don't know.
He was also a host on
John
Family Feud.
O'Hurley.
That's right.
Yeah. He was a host, and then now Steve Harvey's good.
It was what's his name from Tool Time?
I was gonna say, are we gonna skip over my choice for best Family Feud host, Richard Karn?
Or Richard.
Maybe it's because I myself portray 40-year-old single dad energy, but I, for one, am a big Richard Karn fan.
Karn or Kind?
Wait a minute. You portray 40-year-old single dad energy. How old are you? You're like 24.
28.
Oh, that's Karn.
But I like to wear Hawaiian shirts. I make cheesy dad jokes. Women often are repulsed by the sight of me.
You listen to like, what's that? Women what?
I'm sorry, what? I said women are often repulsed by the sight of me.
Okay.
Richard Karn, I feel like, was just like kind of, he and Louis and John O'Hurley were like, Family Feud was like daytime, like middays,
right? Like
kind of like off in the distance.
To me, that was like,
it was
like Brett Favre as a Jet.
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, I remember that season, but it was a transitional deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there was like syndication. You're like, it's on the Game Show Network or whatever. What's this? Steve Harvey, I feel like, has brought Family Feud to another stratosphere with the prime time, the celebrities. You got him with all the NBA and NFL players and all that stuff. Now, Steve Harvey's fantastic.
I'll give you so back to my Ryan Seacrest point. A guy that didn't have that characteristic, that quality that comes off as smarmy, Dick Clark. I'm going older school here, but like when he did $100,000 Pyramid, see, Strahan now does $100,000 Pyramid, and I'm not a fan of Strahan either. I mean, he's okay, but like, I don't know. There's something about Michael Strahan. He's a little bit cheesy. Dick Clark, though, like $100,000 Pyramid would always have the right answer. It's like, yeah, okay, dude. Like, we get it. You're super smart. Trebek got labeled as that in mockery, but Dick Clark was really that way. And then I saw, I think it was, I can't remember what movie I saw and Dick Clark appeared to be like extremely smug. I think it was Bowling for Columbine.
So is your vote for Family Feud best host Richard Dawson?
It's Richard Dawson, undoubtedly. There's no Richard Dawson. That's like saying, I mean, honestly, it's like saying who's the greatest Chicago Bull?
Michael Jordan. But you're comparing Richard Dawson to Michael Jordan?
Richard Dawson is the face of Family Feud.
He's the face of the original,
listen,
but I don't think Family Feud was
Steve Harvey is fabulous. Don't get me wrong. Steve Harvey's great. He's funny on it. He has the same characteristic I'm talking about. People that go on there are not mesmerized by Steve Harvey, and that's a very positive trait. It's a major kudos to him, and he's a funny guy, and he's down to earth. I mean, there's nothing about Steve Harvey you don't love. When Steve Harvey did the Miss Universe or Miss America or what, I think it was Miss Universe, and he read the wrong card, and then he was able to make fun of it. You know, there was a level of humility to that and normalcy that I think people found very refreshing. But I will die on this hill. On this crown hill, that's correct. I was just there yesterday. Richard Dawson is undoubtedly the best Family Feud host of all time. Undoubtedly.
I'm not even putting out, like, I'm going to put out a Twitter poll on this, and I'm not even going to list anybody except for Steve Harvey and Richard Dawson so we can get to the bottom of this. There's not even a point of adding a third or fourth option. It's one or the other.
Well, recency bias, there are a lot of people, and I get it. I mean, Richard Dawson, you're going in the way back. I get it. I mean, I'm probably the youngest of people that remember watching Richard Dawson. But Richard Dawson was Steve Harvey is a multimedia personality. He's a comedian. He hosts a television talk show.
He's a five-tool player.
Correct. Richard Dawson was, I mean, he was an actor, right? But Richard Dawson, after being an actor, the second part of his career, which almost became the pinnacle part of his career, he was a game show guy. He was on, he was in all the different like Password.
There was like 3 channels back then, though. That's why.
But he was always on it. Everybody back then was
okay.
smoking cigarettes. Mm-hmm. He's smoking cigarettes. He's kissing women. He's got beautiful blue eyes, and he's just cool. Richard Dawson was like the Frank Sinatra of game shows. He just, like, literally, he'd get a paper cut and cool would ooze out. He was just cool. But I'm telling you, like, indisputably, Richard Dawson is the face of Family Feud.
Okay. We'll see. We'll see what the Twitter poll says, which we know is all knowing.
Well, okay, are we going to, let me ask you this. First off, how are we wording the poll?
I said the best Family Feud host of all time is, and I said Richard Dawson or Steve Harvey.
Us Richard Karn fans are in protest right now.
Well, you sit over there with your other 3 friends.
Okay, Gene Wood did it.
Richard Karn.
No, Gene Wood was the studio announcer. Richard Dawson, I'm trying to see how long Richard Dawson did it. Ray Combs, by the way, who was a host on Family Feud, I'm not kidding you. He was a furniture salesman in Indianapolis when he moved to L.A. to become, he was doing stand-up comedy but lived in Indianapolis and was selling furniture here when he moved out to Los Angeles to do his comedy and then ultimately ended up as a host on Family Feud. And he passed away in 1996. He was 40 years old when he passed away.
Jeez.
Wow. So have you gotten any results yet on your poll?
It's probably very few so far. I'll retweet it out. There's one vote for, I literally just posted.
Somebody said, how about Regis on Millionaire? Regis was cool, but same
Millionaire,
thing. Like, I think people liked, Regis had the same characteristic, right? Like people were just like, it's Regis.
Yeah. But I feel like Millionaire was kind of like a flash in the pan.
Well, totally.
I mean,
Once Millionaire realized that their ratings were tanking, and so they completely. I will go to my grave with this also. The guy that finally won Millionaire and won the $1 million that called his dad and goes, "Dad, I'm about to win $1 million." That was. They were like, "Listen, people are getting fatigued by the fact that no one is winning on this. We got to have somebody win," and they absolutely greased it for that guy. I mean. What president appeared on Laugh-In? That was the $1 million question. When the $500,000 questions were like, what molecular structure? You know what I mean? Come on.
Well, I didn't think we would get to Millionaire tinfoil hat segment, but that's what we've gotten to. Right now, it's like it just posted, 18 votes, 50-50 for Richard Dawson and Steve Harvey.
I'm telling you, Richard Dawson, Steve Harvey might be the most popular right now because he's doing it. But even Steve Harvey knows that's Richard Dawson's position. Steve Harvey's like, what do you do for a living? I'm the new Richard Dawson. That's what he says.
We'll see. We'll see what the poll says. I don't know. Time now for a morning check down, by the way.
The morning check down. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Take a brief break from the game show debate.
By the way, when you read those results, huge missed opportunity that you did not say survey says.
Survey says, Steve Harvey. It's close. It's close right now. It's just gotten off and running. We got 24 hours on this poll, folks. Vote accordingly. All right, yesterday in baseball, Philadelphia Phillies top my Cubs 5-1. The Cincinnati Reds get back in the winning slot with a 3-1 win over Jake's Baltimore Orioles. Take that. Cardinals get a win over the Astros 4-2. White Sox fall the Angels. Shohei Ohtani put on a show. 10 strikeouts, 2 solo home runs. They beat the White Sox 4-2. Guardians over the Royals 2-1. Kevin's Athletics top the Yankees 2-1. And let's see what else. My Diamondbacks top the Rays 8-4. Good for me. And the Pittsburgh Pirates over the San Diego Padres 9-4. Indianapolis Indians idle yesterday. They take on the Louisville Bats tonight at 6:35 in Kentucky.
By the way, Richard Dawson, my Twitter account indicates Richard Dawson is the answer.
Well, that skews to the
somebody
demographic.
mentioned Chuck Woolery. Now, you want to talk about smarmy.
Oh, yeah.
Back in 2-2, though, right? Did you mention that the Colts training camp schedule has been announced?
No, I was going to leave that to you.
Colts training camp schedule has been announced. They announced it yesterday. Things beginning in Grand Park on Wednesday, July 26th. From 9 until noon, Colts City will be open, and then the practice that is open to the public from 10 a.m. until 11 o'clock in the morning. Same schedule applies for Friday, July the 28th. Most notably, night practices. Saturday, July 29th from 6 until 7:30. That's Back Together weekend there. Then other night practices. Saturday, August 5th from 6 until 7:30. There's no theme for that practice. The others have all themes. Like Wednesday, August 16th, 6 until 8 o'clock night practice. That is a joint practice with the Chicago Bears. Thursday, August 17th, also a night practice. Joint practice / Thirsty Thursday. Other theme nights, by the way, Give Back Sunday is Sunday, August 6th. Fan Appreciation, Thursday, August 10th. Salute to Service, that's on Tuesday, August 1st. And Kids Day, Friday, July 28th. The pop quiz is next. Your chance at a Jiffy Lube oil change. 239-1070 is the telephone number. First question is a hard one, and that is, who is the greatest Family Feud host of all time? Correct answer is Richard Dawson. By the way, if you'd like to call in, then you are already 1 for 1. But you got to go 5 for 5 to win an oil change. We will do it next. 239-1070 is the telephone number here on Kevin and Query, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
For welcoming me and Jairus to Indiana. Expect some good things from us and the team.
The Ride with JMV.
Weekdays 3 to 6.
On 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan. Have you studied? Can you handle the pressure? Sharpen your pencils. It's time for the Pop Quiz with Kevin and Query. Brought to you by Jiffy Lube, Indiana's favorite oil change since 1985.
Jake trying to quell votes for Richard Dawson in the studio here.
Here's a better way of saying it. Maybe I should have been more clear here. Of the people who have hosted Family Feud, which one is most associated as the host of Family Feud? It is indisputably Richard Dawson.
Well, yeah, you're going to say the first host that ever did it is the one that's...
I don't think he was the first, though, was he? Yeah, he was. Was he? Mm-hmm.
That's like saying,
But I'm telling you, like, he was also great. I mean, he was great at it. He was the guy.
But that's like saying who's the host of Millionaire, Regis Philbin or Meredith Vieira. You would say Regis Philbin 10 out of 10 times. No one remembers that. The Meredith Vieira days were like mid.
But Richard Dawson also. How long has Steve Harvey done it?
I mean, he's been
well over a decade by now.
Yeah, he's been doing it for a while.
How long did Richard Dawson do it?
20 years.
I mean, Richard Dawson Match Game was what he was most known for before Family Feud, and then boom.
Steve Harvey has done Family Feud for 23 years. I'm sorry, for 13 years.
20. Okay, I was going to say 23.
I did math very poorly in my head for a second.
How long did Richard Dawson do it?
Give me a second.
Apparently, or 23.
23 years.
Let's see here. He started in 75. He was the host up until it looks like 1980 is what it's saying here.
No, that's incorrect. Because he was doing it. Matter of fact, most people probably didn't even know Family Feud until
76 to 85, and then an extra year from 94 to 95.
Okay, so 10?
10 in total, yes.
I'm telling you. Now, a little bit different, too, because back then, well, I guess, is Family Feud still on every day, but it's in syndication, right?
I mean, yeah, there's still new episodes.
But it was a nightly primetime show back then.
Yeah, the nighttime's now like the celebrity versions and all that stuff.
239-1070 is the telephone number for the Pop Quiz. Give me a number 1 through 6, Mark.
2.
Number 2, who do we have, Sam?
We're going with Dave.
Dave, what's up?
Hey, how you doing?
All right, Dave, how old a fella are you?
I am 68.
When you think of Family Feud, what host do you think of?
Oh, undoubtedly Richard Dawson.
See, I'm telling you.
Demographic tells me that right there.
Dave, are you a retired gentleman? You still a working guy?
Well, I was working part-time until recently.
Everything okay with that?
Well, I drove a shuttle for a Northside dealership, and I got terminated for speeding.
Ooh.
He giggles as he does that. Now, let me ask you, Dave, does that eliminate you from prospective employment elsewhere doing the same thing?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Was this a one-time offense, or do you have a lead foot?
Well, I kind of have a lead foot, but and I did it with a customer in the car, which was a no-no, and I knew, I fessed up to it. I told them I made a mistake.
Were they cool about it?
Well, actually, I was there for 8 years and never had any kind of problems and anything, really. I did have one other speeding ticket, but, I don't know. It was kind of a bad deal.
Now, what was and I'm sorry to hear that, Dave, what was your primary career, like, in terms of before retirement age or, before doing things like that?
I sold commercial hardware and doors and frames and high-end decorative hardware, and then an import lock company for Central Indiana Hardware.
That's cool. And Dave, are you a native to Central Indiana?
Oh, yeah.
What high school did you attend?
Actually, went to New Pal.
New Pal High School. Okay, boy, what was your graduating class at New Pal High School? And now let me guess, Dave, because I'm a bit of an aficionado in these areas. I take pride in it. I'm going to guess that you were the class of 72 or 73, but I'll go 73.
73, correct.
Okay. So the class of 73 in New Pal, I'm going to guess your graduating class was 108 kids.
Boy, you're almost right on the number. I want to say it was around 108, 110, something like that.
How about them apples? What was your class rank, Dave?
Not very good.
61. You were 61 out of 108, right?
Possibly.
Okay, well. All right, here we go. I was class rank 482 was my class rank, by the way. I'm very proud of that fact. 1284 in my graduating class. Though. All right, here we go. Question number 1 for you, Dave. You ready?
Yes.
In 2007, Indiana Mr. Basketball selected number 1 overall in the NBA draft on this date 16 years ago was who? An Indiana high school basketball player. He was the number 1 selection in the 2007 NBA draft. Kevin Pritchard, now with the Pacers, drafted this player to the Portland Trailblazers.
Oh my God!
He had a teammate. Named Mike Conley. They played together at Lawrence North.
Oh, Greg Oden.
Okay.
All right, Dave. Atlanta's Ronald Acuna Jr. drove in his 50th run of the season in last night's win over the Twins. He's just the second player to drive in 50 runs and steal 35 bases before July 1st since an RBI became an official stat in 1920. Who did it first? Was it Joe Morgan, Jose Canseco, Ricky Henderson, or Cesar Cedeno?
Cesar Cedeno. I would love some chicken wings, by the way.
Dave.
Cesar Cedeno.
Okay.
All righty. Jake.
Shohei Ohtani homered twice and picked up the win as the starting pitcher in the Angels win over the White Sox last night, Dave. He is just the 6th pitcher with 10 strikeouts and 2 home runs in a game since the pitcher's mound was moved in 1893. Who was the last pitcher to do that? Milt Pappas, Madison Bumgarner, Zach Greinke, or Rick Wise?
How about Wise?
Okay.
All right, Dave. Rounding it out. Let's see. No, not rounding it out. On this, what did you ask? Which one did you just ask? Did you ask 3 or okay?
Well, you pay attention.
You turned.
Show's not over till 10.
I looked at it. I looked away for a second. I got completely turned around. On this day in 1987, Don Baylor of the Red Sox set a modern major league record by being hit by a pitch for the 244th time in his career. Ouch. He would finish his career with 267 hit by pitches. Who broke Baylor's record, finishing his career with 285? Jason Kendall, Anthony Rizzo, Craig Biggio, or Chase Utley?
Biggio.
Nice.
Good one.
All right, Dave, rounding you out here. Edmonton's Connor McDavid wins the Hart Trophy. He is the MVP of the NHL. That is the 3rd time in the last 8 years he has taken home that hardware. He's the 5th player to win the MVP 3 times over his first 8 NHL season. Wayne Gretzky won the award in each of his first 8 seasons, which is incredible. Which of the following players did not win the Hart Trophy as the National Hockey League Most Valuable Player 3 times in their first 8 seasons? So 3 of these guys accomplished this rare feat. 1 guy did not. Alex Ovechkin. Was it Mario Lemieux, Bobby Clarke, or Bobby Orr? Which did not accomplish that feat?
Bobby Clarke.
That's a pretty good guess, actually.
All right, Dave.
Bobby Clarke sounds like the lead singer of a bebop band, doesn't it?
Oh, they're opening for the
Doesn't
Beach
it,
Boys
Dave?
this summer.
Like the Bobby Clarke 5. Okay, here we go.
Bobby Clarke and the Bips coming at you.
Greg Oden was indeed correct for question number 1.
Ronald Acuna Jr. drove in his 50th run. He's the 2nd player to drive in 50 runs and steal 35 bases before July 1st since 1920. Who did it first? He said Cesar Cedeno, and it was actually Joe Morgan in 1975.
Chicken wing, man. Zach Greinke was the correct answer for question number 3. What'd I say?
Greinke? Like he's Rob Gronkowski's nephew?
Zach Greinke, that's right. Who was the other? Barry Zito was in the... Weren't they teammates?
I love Barry Zito. Yeah. Barry Zito was on the A's, most notably, and the Giants.
Yeah, but where was...
Greinke was on the Royals.
Obviously the Royals, but wasn't he with the A's also at some point?
I don't think
anyway, Craig Biggio and Mario Lemieux were the other 2 answers. I will call Zach Greinke for my entire life, by the way.
Well, just like Dustin Dopirac?
I can't get that right.
I know you can't.
It's Dustin Dopirac, right?
I mean, I literally just said it. Dopirac. Unbelievable.
He's without peer in terms
Yeah,
of the
think of it like that
frustrating
way.
names.
There you go.
I'm just saying. I'm still thrown off by your Richard Dawson take.
I said not only is Steve Harvey the best Family Feud host, he's the best game show host of all
Well,
time.
that's not. Now that is
Is that
not
slander?
correct.
Is that libel? Am I going to go to
here's the
common
thing.
law court?
It's meant as a compliment to Steve Harvey.
Oh, I get more belly laughs from Steve Harvey doing stuff.
I get it, but hear me out. It's meant as a compliment to Steve Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference between Steve Harvey, if you asked 100 people on the street, tell me what you know, like word association, Steve Harvey. Some would say like pageant host. Some would say comedian. Some would say talk show host. Some would say author. Many would say game show host, but like you say, Richard Dawson, Gene Rayburn, Bob Barker, instantly people know who you're talking about or what they're like game show hosts. That's exactly what they think of as the game show first and foremost. Bob Eubanks. I mean,
some of those though, I feel like you have to know like the demographic. If you're asking like a 25-year-old, hey, Richard Dawson, they'll say who?
But part of that though, Mark, my point is this. Again, it's at no fault of Steve Harvey, and it's not necessarily as a credit to Richard Dawson or Gene Rayburn, but those guys were doing it when game shows were, that was a massive thing. So it's kind of like saying, it's Shohei Ohtani is probably a better pitcher than Oral Hershiser. But Hershiser is better known as a pitcher in the United States because he was doing it during a time when a higher percentage of people were watching baseball.
Yes, that's correct.
So that's my point. Like, Richard Dawson, I think, is more synonymous with Family Feud than is Steve Harvey.
We'll have to see. Indianapolis, by the way, second place today in worst air qualities in the world.
Can I guess when we come back?
Indy.
Can I guess who's leading us when we come back?
Sure.
All right.
Go right ahead.
Is this in the world, you said?
In the world.
Shanghai. Okay, we'll get that answer when we come back.
Cleveland to take on the Guardians. Tuesday evening at 6:30 on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You're listening to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
We are not, by any stretch of the imagination, making light of the fact that it is light out in Indianapolis, but not to the level it should be because of there's a level of fascinating to it, but the smoke cover from the wildfires in Canada, which it does also make you think, good Lord, like if it's this bad here, just that gives perspective as to how much wildfire must be burning, which is obviously awful. But the air quality in terms of the thickness of the smoke here has given Indianapolis a score, if you will, that is in the very unhealthy range. So, the Children's Museum, one of those that has canceled their outdoor kids' activities today. So certainly be mindful of it if you're going to be out. And I would say physical activity outside, probably not the best of ideas. Mark Dykton, you had mentioned that right now in the world, the air quality score for Indianapolis is the second worst.
Second highest, yeah.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
yes.
second highest, yeah.
So the second worst, second highest, whatever. So I'm going to guess the city that has the worst, but I'm going to ask a few hint questions.
Sure.
The first would be, if I was to travel to this city, would I need a passport?
Yes.
The second would be, could I drive to this city?
No.
And the third would be, would you guess that this city is frequently on said list?
I would not say that. I wouldn't guess from what's going on in Canada right now that they would be on the list. So no.
So
I actually don't know why there is.
So it would not be
high.
Industrial related.
Not that I can think
Okay,
of.
then
Then
I am going to ask one other question and then I'll guess.
Sure.
If I had to, if I told you I was moving to this country for 2 years, would you say like that's pretty cool, or would you be like, why the world are you moving there?
I would say that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty interesting. I'd say wear a lot of sunscreen.
Melbourne, Australia.
Incorrect.
Am I in the right area of the world?
No.
Buenos Aires, Argentina.
No.
Right region of the world?
No.
All right, one last guess here. I will go with Abu Dhabi.
That is pretty close. Dubai has a current worst air quality index of 359.
Wow.
Indianapolis is 262. That's according to Wish TV.
Would that be because of industry? I mean, they're building a ton of stuff around there. I
have no idea. 359 seems like that's almost like unbreathable. You would think 359. I mean, I don't know what the highest.
I always get this confused. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Dubai is a city within the United Arab Emirates. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
And then, pardon my naivete here, Abu Dhabi is that also a city? Or is Abu Dhabi? I'm pardon my ignorance.
I know it's the capital and second most populous city in the United Arab Emirates.
So Abu Dhabi is
after Dubai, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, Scotty points out, as several people did, how much of the smoke in the air is from the Grateful Dead concert.
Boy, that's a contact high that would be pretty fierce, I'd think.
Dead and Company, of course, what it's now known. Do you remember the year that, Mark, you would remember it, Scotty might, the year that they had the riots at the Grateful Dead show? Riots is probably an extreme word, but they crashed the back fence, fans did, in order to get in, so they canceled, I believe, the second or third night of it. This would have been 96, maybe? 95? I was driving up to Fort Wayne. It was around 4th of July weekend, I think. I had a buddy that was selling fireworks in Fort Wayne, like as a summer job. And I drove up to go hang out in Fort Wayne for the night. And as I was driving up I-69 just north of where Ruoff is, back then Deer Creek, there was some dude just hitchhiking with a huge, like, he had a What are those big wooden sticks that you like it's like an instrument. You know what I'm talking about? It's like a walking stick, but you also it's like a horn, like a
trombone?
No, wood. It's like a bamboo wood. Huh?
A didgeridoo.
Is that what it's called?
I mean, it's a big wood tube that you blow into.
Correct.
Didgeridoo.
That's what it's called?
Yes.
I'm
not making up a Dr. Seuss word
I thought it was called like a bugle.
Oh, well, a bugle horn?
No, but it was a big wooden deal. Yeah, I guess you're right. What is it in Fast Times? Jeff Spicoli throws it at his little brother. It's like, Mom, Jeff threw I thought it was bugle at me. Anyway, regardless, this guy was walking with one of those, and I said, hey, man, where are you going? He's like, man, I'm going north, dude. I was supposed to go to the Dead show. Now they're playing like in Lansing, and I'm trying to go to that. I go, hey, I'll give you a ride to Fort Wayne. So the guy got in my car, and he started playing that thing in the passenger seat. And I'm like, okay. So as we're driving up, I said, hey, I know this is weird, but I've always wanted to see where James Dean, his resting place. Yeah, that's it. A digger. How do you say that?
Didgeridoo.
Didgeridoo, okay. I said, I've always wanted to see James Dean's resting place in Fairmount, but I've never been there. Do you want to go? And he's like, all right, cool. So I have this deadhead hippie, like 25-year-old kid, I think he's from California or something, with his didgeridoo or whatever the thing that's called. And we're driving, and we get to the cemetery in Fairmount, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't know exactly where James Dean's grave is. And at that point, they hadn't put the signs up yet to tell you how to get there. So we're both just aimlessly walking, and all of a sudden I hear this noise. And I thought, what in the world am I hearing? Well, he had found James Dean's grave and was trying to let me know, but instead of yelling to me, he was playing his, what do you call it again?
Didgeridoo.
A didgeridoo.
Didgeridoo, yeah. It's like a foghorn. I'm like, oh, okay. So there you go.
So do you want to play another guessing game?
Yeah.
26 years ago today, something pretty historic happened in sports. This is not a sad story. This is not death related. But something pretty historic happened 26 years ago.
So we're talking
today.
1997, right?
Mm-hmm.
So June of 1997.
Yep.
Is the key figure in this still living?
Yes. Both are.
So it's two individuals.
Mm-hmm.
My first guess would be that Mike Tyson bit Evander Holyfield's ear.
Correct.
Is that it?
That is it.
Wow. Okay. I was at Aaron Perlman's house. Aaron Perlman got a. He was living in like an apartment or condo, whatever you want to call it, down just kind of off of Lockerbie, and that was just when we were just at the age when people were starting to move downtown and that kind of thing. But he had a super cool place, and I remember we're like, downtown. I mean, that shows you how long ago it was. Downtown. Nobody lives downtown. But Perlman did. It was a nice place. We went down there and watched it. And do you remember watching it? It was like, what in the world just happened?
Yeah, I was like 12 years old or something. I think my uncle ordered it, and we were watching it. I'm like, wait, why? What happened? Like,
I remember
Holyfield just like backs away and starts grabbing at his ear.
Well, the second time, so he did it twice, right?
Yeah.
So the first time he did it, you see Holyfield, back away, and you're like, what happened? And then they explained what took place. And then the second time he backed up and he started jumping up and down, like I think in a combination of pain and frustration. He started jumping up and down in anger, probably, and that's when they called it. And I mean, that was, I wouldn't even say that. Obviously, that was beyond the beginning of the end for Tyson, but that was really kind of cemented it as. And I don't know that people can grasp. Prior to Buster Douglas, it would be impossible to explain to someone who was not around then the aura of invincibility around Mike Tyson. The concept of Mike Tyson being beaten was impossible. You watched his fights strictly to see how quickly he was going to knock guys out. I mean, when he knocked out Spinks in 90 seconds, it's like, holy cow. Mm-hmm. He and then when he got beat by Buster Douglas in the same night as the slam dunk contest, by the way, it was, that probably still to this day, as a half century of walking this planet, was the most shocking sports thing that I can recall. All I remember is Chris Jordan had a party. His parents showed up unannounced early. We thought they were out of town. People are like jumping out of windows and running out of the house thinking the cops had shown up. and Jordan's parents are pulling up to the house in complete shock of these hundreds of kids pouring out of their house, and his dad is infuriated, and Jordan tries to distract his dad and goes, "Dad, Mike Tyson got beat," and his dad is livid and literally stops and turns around and goes, "Wait, what did you just say?" And I was standing right there, and we're like, "Oh my God!" His dad's like, "He really got beat?" I mean, never mind the hundreds of kids jumping out the window in the kitchen of my house. Did you just tell me that Mike Tyson got beat? A lot of fun today, so much so we'll do it again tomorrow. Does that sound good to you, Mark?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, everybody stay safe out there. We'll talk to you tomorrow.